Welcome to God is Open. I am your host, Christopher Fisher. Today on God is Open, we are going to be discussing not all my short videos. We don't got time for that. Well, by the way, I have a guest. The reason we don't have time for that is because Drew Mack here doesn't have time to go through every single video. You're muted or something? He's just not. I
Okay,
cannot.
can you hear me now? I'm unmuted now. I
Can,
was listening to YouTube in the background and it wasn't synced or whatever, and so I was a little
okay.
bit confused. What a
Fantastic.
great start.
What a great start. Yes, we're going to be talking about interesting little Calvin YouTube shorts that have Calvinists pulling their hair out. And so you had a lot of interesting questions and comments, and so I thought you'd be a perfect person to come in to kind of like talk through some of these things because like you're interested, like where is this coming from, and how does this make sense, and what's our evidence for this, and things like that. And it's just a massive amount of data that I've been crawling through the last month on all of this stuff. It's just insane, and so it's our chance to talk about one or two short videos. Anyways, you want to introduce yourself to the channel? I don't think they know who you are. This guy thinks you're Kevin Thompson. This guy thinks you're Idol Killer.
I'm Drew. I run a channel called Provisionist Perspective, where we promote and defend God's love and provision for everyone, which is a little bit at odds with Calvin's theology and apparently history, as I'm sure we'll get into a little bit today. But that's who I am. I've been on here a few times. Probably a handful of people know who I am.
Yes, absolutely. You have to get more active in the scene. And so, how's the heat wave doing? I have it on good authority. You have no air conditioning.
Well, a lot of people here don't. So for those that don't know, I live in Spain, and a lot of people don't. I have air conditioning on here. We had that installed when we moved in 2 years ago because it's just unbearably hot here, and I had to persuade my landlord to let us do this. And she said, previously no one else has complained. And like, well, they were lying because it's really hot here and you need air conditioning. People are dying in Europe because you won't use air conditioning.
Right. And people can't complain
It's
if they die of heat stroke.
for real.
That's probably. I just saw like a graph like deaths per thousand, and it was like comparing heat deaths in Europe to gun deaths in America, and it's just like minuscule the amount of gun deaths per thousand compared to heat deaths per thousand in Europe. It's like, oh man, we need to start preaching the gospel of air conditioning to these people, these
For real.
poor, suffering people. But we don't have too much time, and so we are going to kind of jump over here and switch to my other computer here. Oh no, my mouse is not working. Maybe now it'll work. Oh, there we go. All right, so we got all these shorts. Um, I've so these shorts are 60 seconds each, and I have to condense a lot of information down into very small chunks. And so these are very stripped down versions of larger data sets. And so it's a lot of compact information. So like one sentence is going to have a whole ton of data and support that kind of backs that up if that makes sense. And so I was very precise in these videos. I chose my language carefully and selectively to put together stories in 60-second increments. And so it doesn't give it a lot of time to explain background details and other things that I might miss or their supporting information. It's just getting out key concepts. And so, well, I've prepared. I sent you the Word document. I prepared a Word document that's called Shorts, and I've been putting references. I didn't do this as I was creating these videos, but I went back and I grabbed all the dialogues for all my videos, and then I started breaking them up and putting sources and information, people making the same claims, analysis, first-hand accounts, second-hand accounts for all these different claims. And so the first one, I don't think we should start with the exciting one. Was John Calvin homosexual? The first one that the Calvinists went crazy over was about Calvin seizing power in Geneva. And so I'm sure you've watched this one. You shared it.
That was the one. That was the one that I reposted, and everybody just lost their minds about it, and then didn't engage with any of the sources that this was coming from.
Right. And so Ryan Reeves, that hack, I think his name's Ryan Reeves. Reeves, something Reeves, Calvinist professor guy, he was tagged in it and he just makes a dismissive comment. And so
the
go
The
for it.
irony of that, by the way, was that, and people that have been tuning into your channel know this, you reviewed Ryan Reeves, and then he got tagged as an expert in response to your video where you had already shown that he was not making accurate claims about the whole Calvin Servetus affair. So
He made
I thought,
multiple provable lies.
and
And
I sent your video to him and just said, it's ironic you've been tagged because you were reviewed in this, and he didn't have anything else to say. So.
right. And so his errors are not just like, oh, I'm getting some small little detail wrong. Like in my review, I said, oh, he's going to Spain, where he's going to Italy, Spain, kind of same thing. And so it's a factual error that doesn't like really matter. His errors were like Calvin is complaining that he has no authority. That was a lie. He lied about that. There's no quote that says that. He misrepresented the quote and turned it to 180 what Calvin was actually saying. He's saying, I'm going to kill Servetus if my authority has any power. And then he killed Servetus. And so that's not him saying I have no power. And then he also was dismissing the eyewitness accounts of Servetus's death and saying that it was published a lot later. Oh, these are older accounts. They could be dismissed right away. Right away, these eyewitness accounts are circulating right away. Castillo, who's getting people from Geneva who are outraged about that, coming to Bern and giving him the accounts, and then he puts it in circulation within the month, within the end of 1553. And so his errors are critical errors that affect very much what is being debated or the things that people are actually concerned about. These are not gentle errors. Okay, so we're going to go to Calvin seizing power. The funny thing about this is how brain rotted modern Americans are. And so we had several people try to refute it by trying to use Grok to say, hey, Grok, is this true? And Grok is trained on primarily Calvinist sources, and the Grok does not understand what the video is claiming. I asked Grok to give a transcript of the video, is unable to do that. It was using just like kind of general vague impressions it was getting from the video to try to refute what the video was saying. It misrepresented the mob that I have as an anti-Calvin mob, and they thought it was a pro-Calvin mob in an attempt for Calvin to seize power with a mob. That's not what's happening in the video. And so the Calvinists being brain dead, and a lot of Americans are outsourcing their thinking to AI. It's like, oh, the AI just said, oh, this is not factual, whereas the AI doesn't understand what's going on, doesn't understand the primary sources. It's been trained on modern pages like Biblical Answers by Calvinists. It's not been trained on the primary sources. Grok is particularly bad. I had a very huge fight with Grok trying to admit what's written in the primary source. Why doesn't Grok not admit what's in a primary source? Because it's got all this other commentary that overrides the actual source data. And so Grok is very terrible for research, for scientifically trying to get into a meticulous detail. ChatGPT is a lot better. ChatGPT might make some errors, but ChatGPT, if you like work with it and start talking through the issues, it'll start understanding the level of analysis you're looking at, and it'll start pulling in additional references. ChatGPT was great in that it alerted me to the existence of a first-hand narrative of someone who watched Servetus's execution, of which we have fragments that are reproduced in a later work, and he didn't reproduce the whole thing. Why? Because it agreed with Castillo's account. He didn't need to do it. So the first-hand witness that he's quoting is agreeing with Castillo, Yeah, his history of the death of Servetus, and so he didn't need to actually have to reproduce that whole thing. And yet Calvinists go around and they try to discount the Castillo account. Oh yeah, oh he's just a polemic and stuff like. Oh, that's another thing these guys try to do. They try to say, oh, these people are just anti-Calvin. Yeah, Calvin tried to kill these people. These people all knew him. There was Bowden, there was Costello, there's Bolsick. These were all his friends. Amy Perrin was his friend. Amy Perrin brought him back from exile. He destroys all his friends. His friends have to flee and flee from Calvin. They turn on Calvin. These are people who knew Calvin within his life that are writing against him. These are just not just some random Catholic guy over in a cathedral saying, "Oh, I don't like Protestantism." These are people who grew up with him. They learned under him. It's Bowden who says that Calvin was like a father to him. All these people were intimately familiar with Calvin. They should not just be dismissed. And we'll probably get into this. Let's go ahead and start one of these videos, or else my whole thing here will be no video. It'll just be ranting. That might not be the worst thing. All right, Calvin seizes power.
16th century Geneva. The people had fought for freedom. They had driven out the Duke, broken the power of the bishop. They were the children of Geneva.
All right, so this is like just standard history. Okay, good news, everyone. I published the third volume of the Calvin Servetus source documents, and in that new publication, I have Betza's Life of Calvin, his original French short, and then I have his longer Latin extension. And then I have Bolsick's Life of Calvin, and then supplemental sources by individuals, a Catholic individual who had republished it, and then added plenty of footnotes and other references. And so this document here is very critical for a lot of these claims that we will be going over today, and has a lot of sources for that. So everyone could go grab that finally. Everyone's always like, where are you finding this stuff? This stuff isn't published. And if this stuff is not published, that means AI has not been trained on it. If this stuff is unpublished and not accessible. And so let's keep that in mind, how AI works. But in volume 4, which is unpublished, which I need to work on, I'm going to have a history of Geneva. I'm going to pull it up real quick. And I'll allow you to talk a little bit while I while I pull this up. If you want to add something.
Yeah, well, like I guess while you're pulling it up, it is interesting how people have been dismissing all of these sources. Just, oh, that's just a papist, who's talking there, especially this Bolsick guy who's doing the biography of Calvin. And nobody seems to be realizing that that's fallacious. Like you can't just dismiss something because of the source it's coming from. Like if you were to demonstrate like historically, like Bolsick's just making stuff up, like somebody said, obviously fabricated quotes from people. And I was like, fabricated by who? You're just saying this, and you've not even
right. They don't know the situation. It's something bad against their cult leader, and so they just have to dismiss it out of hand. And so, who's more reliable? Betza, who sings praises. His Life of Calvin is just like crazy ranting and praising about how great and miraculous Calvin is, and all Calvin's enemies are enemies of God. These people are lunatic fanatics. And this is who we're getting the Life of Calvin from people like Reeves. When Reeves is like, I'm just listening today, Reeves is talking about Calvin's childhood. He's like, well, we got two sources. We got Betza, and then we got Caledon, or whatever. That second source is the person who extended Betza's French life. And so it's like, these are not neutral sources. These people are fanatical Calvinists, and everyone in the time frame of Calvin, they say we can't trust these Calvinists. These people just lie without thinking about it. They just tell massive lies. And so, one of my quotes that I have here, I got to try to find it, is by a historian called Galiffi. Now, Galiffi is the individual who's written the most words about Geneva, more than anyone else who exists, likely. Yeah, ChatGPT doesn't know anyone who's written more words about Geneva. He was a Genevan historian who went through all the archives, going through all these different people and these families. He was like independently wealthy, and so he just spent his life reading these archives and putting together character references about all these people. What he says about Bolsec is very interesting. He says that I'll try to find it real quick.
Is this a modern historian that's gone to Geneva and looked all
Like
this
the
stuff
1800s or something.
up? Right. Yeah.
Bolsec.
Geneva, I visited Geneva a couple of years ago, and that place is expensive. It is very, very expensive.
Okay, so here's what he says. He says, this article was already composed when I read Bolsec's Life of Calvin. The article he's referencing is an article about Berthelier. And so he's just saying it's coincidental that what he's describing about Berthelier matches what Bolsec writes in Life of Calvin. And so the Calvinists try to slander and lie about Berthelier's character. He's French. It's like Berthelier or something like that. I'm going to call him Berthelier. I don't care. He says, this article was already composed when I read Bolsec's Life of Calvin, which was unknown to me, for, as I have said and repeated, it is not in the memoirs of contemporaries that I seek the truth. I will say, however, that Bolsec infamously calumniated during his life. He's attacked and disparaged by Calvin and Theodore de Beza, was so justly, so also down to our day. His biographies contain many inaccuracies of detail, but most of the facts are perfectly true. He's saying Bolsec sometimes gets small details wrong, but the thrust of what he's saying is accurate. I do not believe that he knowingly lied, as Calvin's panegyrists, like his haliographers, have done on almost every point. He's saying all these people who write about Calvin, they're just lying. These people are just telling downright falsehoods. He says Bolsec doesn't do it. He might get some little details wrong, but he's not lied. He believes these things that he's saying. I do not believe that he knowingly lied, as Calvin's panegyrists have done on almost every point. As for what he advances about the ventures at Noyon, I know nothing of it at all. And so this is the reference to the homosexuality claim. He's saying, I don't have opinion. I'm not talking about that. And consequently, I do not wish either to admit them or deny him. He's remaining skeptical. He's not accepting those claims or denying those claims.
So he alludes to the Noyon accusation in that sentence.
So he's the historian. We'll get into this, but he says it could have been a different John Calvin, that they have records for sodomy. That he posed that theory. And so
is he the first to pose that theory?
I think he might be. He's the one that's sourced when people talk about that theory, that there's a different John Calvin. What is certain is the horrible fury of Calvin against the Bertheliers, and especially against Philibert. This is the guy who gets beheaded, who was a gentle and moderate man. That's interesting. Calvin's not a gentle and moderate man. He kills a gentle and moderate man. And then they slander. They kills his younger brother. Philibert runs off in exile. And Pecqueroy improperly adopted the lies with which Bonavard blackened him, which have no foundation. Philibert Berthelier constantly conducted himself with disinterestedness and wisdom, and Calvin's outburst against him and against his brother is otherwise inexplicable, except by the fact that of a concentrated rage and extreme need for vengeance. Calvin had this extreme need for vengeance against his enemies. The inhabitants of Noyon, perhaps, thought they were performing a good act of good Catholics, so he poses this theory as well, that maybe these reports, these certified reports coming from Noyon, are Catholics trying to get back at Calvin. We're talking about the wrong video. But by calumniating Calvin, and Berthier, who never spoke of it in public, was perhaps imprudent enough to let one of his tyrant spies or secret friends glimpse at what he heard and said. Calvin had a spy network, and so Berthelier is not taking these charges and spreading them around. He's keeping them secret, but Calvin has spies, and the spies learn about the existence of these reports, and this is part of the reason Calvin has rage against them. Okay, so back to the video. All these things tie together. They all tie together. They're all interlinked. And so evidence for one video ties into evidence for the next.
Then John Calvin appeared. He flooded the city with immigrants to concentrate power.
Okay, so this is an interesting one that everyone gets mad about. They're like, oh, what do you mean he flooded the city with immigrants to concentrate power? So, ChatGPT doesn't understand the sequence of events in the video, and so this is not talking about flooding the city with immigrants in 1932. But let's look at ChatGPT numbers for French immigrants. Geneva had about 10,000 to 13,000 people before the major refugee wave, then rose to more than 25,000 by around 1560. Cambridge's John Calvin in Context says Geneva, a city about 10,000 inhabitants, doubled in size because of Protestant Reformed refugees, especially from France. Another chapter gives the rise as roughly 12 to 13,000 to more than 25,000 during the 1550s. So half the city is French refugees that John Calvin is letting in, and not only letting in, but admitting to citizenship so that they have votes. So let's hear Geoffrey Watt on this. Now, Geoffrey Watt is a French historian, and his work was in Calvin's Constator, his moral police, his Inquisition. He's the one who, I have the documents, all the records from these moral police going around and pulling people in for saying that a piece of wood is bad and the Constator can make it better. I have these documents. This is the guy who compiled them and turned them in from handwriting script into actually something legible. And he wrote a book about Calvin and the Constator. I might be saying this wrong, but here's what he talks about with the refugees. Few other cities at the time welcomed religious refugees to the same degree as Geneva, which received a huge number of religious refugees in the 1540s and 1550s. Calvin was adamant that the city be open to all people who sought the gospel, regardless of where they were from. In his sermons, Calvin declares that Geneva must be a bright lamp to illuminate those who are far from the gospel. Now, Calvin's sermons were mandatory. You had to go to them. And he used them to attack public figures, people. He would attack people by name, and you were not allowed to clap back. You're not allowed to ever criticize Calvin, or you're dragged before the moral police. And so he uses his pulpit as a bully. During the Servetus trial, he's sitting there raging against Servetus, whipping the population into a frenzy over Servetus. And Servetus does not have any public voice to respond to these public accusations made by his accuser. And Servetus is like, what's going on here? One of the questions, and Calvin was his accuser. Servetus demanded that the city of Geneva question Calvin on whether it's proper that a minister of God should be a lead prosecutor in a trial in which he's advocating murder or advocating execution. It was a bad thing for Calvin to do. But anyways, demanding that such religious refugees be admitted, Calvin blasted, "Those who cry out against foreigners and consider this word an insult could not show more clearly that they are not worthy to be numbered among his children of God, and no more belong to him in his church than they do the dogs or pigs." And so, I don't know if I should read this whole thing. They're all coming from France. This is Calvin's power base. He slowly...
And did he himself start off as a refugee to Geneva?
Yeah, he's a Frenchman, and so he's this is his power base. And as soon as they turn the government more than 50% refugees that are the voting citizens, like, people stop appealing to the Council of the 200 because they know it's just going to go in John Calvin's favor. And so in the year 1555, this is 2 years after Servetus dies. He dies in October of 53. So within the next 2 years, Calvin's been scheming to force all his political rivals out of power. They introduce 122 new members. This is 8% of the vote that are all French refugees. And so this is reported by Watts. There's other numbers that are given by other individuals, but I'm not sure if it's the same time frame. He says, in the year 1555, I don't know where this is from Watts again. The year 1555 marked the definitive turning point in favor of Calvin and his disciplinary regime. This is Calvin's disciplinary regime. He created this government. One of the conditions being brought from exile was he got to reform the government in this fashion where he had this Inquisition police. These are his people. And if you go to the constitutory records, you can search his name up. He's an integral part in it. It's none of this, oh, Calvin wasn't a citizen. He couldn't carry a weapon. Well, yeah, he had 30 armed people that would travel with him as his posse that was paid for by the state. Yeah, but he can't carry a sword. Yeah, thank you. He says, on February 3, the General Council elected a new syndics, all four of whom were supporters of Calvin. And the councils of 25, 60, 200, also witnesses increased in a number of Calvin supporters. To consolidate their further power, Calvin's partisans also decided to grant citizenship in April to 43 more French residents. The children of Geneva, who are natives to Geneva, see this power play going on, and they start complaining. Part of the trials that happen against Perrin, I believe it's Perrin's trial, some of the charges against him is that he's complaining that Calvin's flooding the government with French refugees and overturning the government in his favor. They don't want this, and this continues to happen. What do they do as a response? They bring in more people, more French citizens. Okay, so now we're going to move to Alfred Vacan's Dictionary of Catholic Theology. Calvin's victory was confirmed in 1555. Having secured a majority in the small council, he systematically granted citizenship to foreigners who had embraced his ideas. On August 13, 300 refugees were granted citizenship for the care and protection of the government. These measures outraged the libertines, like the children of Geneva. Berthier and Perrin took the lead in the rebellion, and he talks about the uprising. But let's move down to Galify's comment on the same event. Now, this is the historian that I put the most stock in, who's written the most words, and I think he actually understands people's character. Like modern historians, let's say a modern historian is doing a history on USAID or a history on Lyndon Johnson. They're not going to talk about how corrupt systematically USAID was or how evil an individual Lyndon Johnson was, and talk about people's individual experiences with him that shows that he's just a ruthless and evil individual murdering his way to the vice presidency and then murdering his way to the presidency. They're going to pretend to be these disinterested scholars. Gaffley's looking at characters and personalities. And so he's the person I put the stock in. He's the one who says Bolsec doesn't knowingly lie. He puts his faith in Bolsec's character. And this is he's a Genevan himself. So he writes this: the Genevans resisted with all the power and repressed in the most infernal manner by the party of terror that Calvin had organized, and into which he had as many as 300 foreign auxiliaries enrolled in a single day, all in the strength of age, they're all fighting age men, all armed, all fanatics or brigands. It's like these are terrible people. All right, we could keep going on. After securing support, this is Genevieve Gross, a massive mission of French immigrants to citizenship in February and April 1555, 4 years after the defeat of the Children of Geneva in May 1555. Calvin finally followed his colleagues and became a citizen. Pastors who became bourgeoisie, limits and consequences of a new wave incorporating ministry actors in Theodore Betz's Geneva.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but Calvin here is solidifying most of his power after the Servetus affair.
That's when the major waves of immigration come, but he still controls part of the charges against him by Perrin. He really needs Perrin out of office because Perrin is the one who's advocating for the native citizens and their rights and their liberties. Before Geneva, was invaded by Calvin and his ilk, they had liberty, they had peace, they had freedom of expression, freedom of thought, and all these things were being taken away by Calvin. One of my videos talks about how one guy says there's no laughter here anymore. Calvin has taken away all the laughter in Geneva. So it's a fake and false allegation. So Calvin just considers everyone who ever opposes him as evil. When Calvin's kicked out, the first time he's kicked out, well, you know what he's kicked out over? Not serving communion to people he called wicked and evil. And what's their wicked, evil crimes? They want him to use yellow bread instead of unleavened bread for the supper. That's what Bolsek gives the account of the details of what these evil people were doing. And so another thing is, like, they would call people whores and they'd call them prostitutes. These are just women who are dancing. And like that, you go to a wedding and you dance, you get reported to Calvin, and Calvin will haul you into a tribunal where they will scream the most obscene things at your wife, call her the worst names, and then because he has a system of spies in the city, if you go out and complain about it, maybe you go to the bar or something and you say, this is what Calvin did, these evil people, they'll take those comments and they'll weaponize the abuse that your wife suffered that you're complaining about, they'll weaponize it against you. This was one of Calvin's normal tactics for destroying political rivals. And so Perrin, in his trial, he's saying that Calvin is weaponizing his authority as someone to decide who to excommunicate or not, to control who actually gets into government, because there's real world effects to what Calvin can do. So Calvin's abusing his authority to shift the government into his favor, and he has control of the moral police from the time he gets back into Geneva. So he's not powerless. Calvin's power struggle was not, these people are overturning my will and I'm so powerless. His power struggle was he did not have absolute power to do absolutely anything he wanted at any time. People got dragged before tribunals for criticizing him. You say he has a hot head, you never work again. This is what we're dealing with.
One thing that I didn't understand about one of the shorts, and maybe we'll get to this. I don't think it was in this one. I think it was in your laughter one. But what was the joke about the wood that was like banned? Like he found that offensive or something?
So
what was like
the consistory, they're the moral police. And so they make bad people good. And so the guy walked over to a piece of wood. Oh, this is a bad piece of wood. Oh, Calvin's consistory, they can make it good.
Right. And then that guy got in trouble for making that joke.
Then he's hauled before the Inquisition for that weird pun joke.
Right.
These people are psychotic fanatics. And so it's all these petty things. And Calvin has a series of spies that are roaming around the city, following political adversaries to get them charged with all these little slight infractions that are made up morals that he made up. On condition of his return to Geneva, he was able to institute these things. This is not a good man. This guy's a megalomaniac. All his enemies are enemies of God. So let's see what else I got. Oh, let's just read Galliffy, since we're on the topic. For years, he carefully had recorded the slightest remarks made against him or against the doctrine of predestination, with which he had so identified himself that it was dangerous to speak against the dogma as against him. The poor were dragged into dungeons, whipped, banished, paraded through the city in their shirts and barefoot, torch in hand, to expiate what it pleased him to call blasphemy. So like when people in Geneva are being punished for blasphemy, that just means they talked against Calvin or talked against his system of ministers. And all these ministers are French refugees. I think it's Galliffy who points out there's only one Genevan minister, and it's a defrocked Catholic priest. This is his power control. Okay, so they call these blasphemies. You talk against Calvin, that's blasphemy. But there were still names too dear for the people for him to dare attack them openly before having increased his material forces. Like he didn't get his way all the time. So Bolsek didn't get executed. And in Betts's Life of Calvin, when he's like, everyone calls Calvin bloodthirsty, but the only heretic he executed was Servetus. He let Castillo and Bolsek get away. he didn't let them get away. He tried to kill them. He tried to murder them. He tried to murder Bolsec. He just didn't have the power consolidated to do it. And the other churches were like pushing against them. It's like that was a trial on predestination, and predestination is why Calvin was called a heretic all over Europe. They're not going to be all for killing some guy over predestination. And so he was unable to kill someone he really wanted to kill. And so this is Bolsec, who was friends with Calvin before Calvin turned on him, drove him out, and then became his critic. And so this is not just some Catholic polemicist. This is someone who knew him and knew him intimately, spent time with him, and Calvin actually tried to kill. Yeah, if someone tries to kill you, you might have a little bit of chip on your shoulder. Okay, so the moment to do it had come, for he had gained the majority of the Petit Council. And since he could lose it from one moment to the next, he hastened for profit from it by having admitted an immense number of new burghers, citizens, almost all French, for the guard and protection of the government. For the purposes of this aggression the purposes of this aggression were not even concealed. He's saying they didn't even hide what they were trying to do. They flooded the government with French for guard and the protection of the government. It's so that it's what's happening in the United States. You flood United States with third world immigrants, the Democrats could shore up power base, get an established voting bloc. He's saying that he's not even hiding it. Calvin is flooding the city in order to gain power. All right. I got so much more people talking about these him seizing through refugees. A few more sources. Bolsec.
Keep playing the video. What does the video say next? So this is he flooded it with because this is the funny thing. Like, I shared this and I said something like, now I understand why a lot of people would not want to be called Calvinists. And this is probably like the least controversial of some of the shorts that you shared, I feel like.
Yes. Okay. So I will keep playing. It says he institutes draconian laws. Let's see. Oh, and then I have a woman being arrested for dancing. You could not be at a wedding and dance. Where does the Bible say you can't dance? King David danced naked in the streets. Where is this in the Bible? And he used it as a weaponizing thing. Anything that he liked was legal. Anything he didn't like was illegal. And so part of these draconian laws, Chastel talks about how, here, listen to this. The Genevan people have always been passionate for liberty, and no kind of oppression has been able to smother it in that flame. Rarely well covered. Never entirely extinguished, its feeling made known to themselves in various ways, according to the variety of circumstances. He's saying the people of Geneva were liberty-loving people. The Calvin stuff that came later is not typical. When people are like, oh, that's just the times that it's not. This is all innovation by Calvin, turning something into a dictatorship that's worse than the Catholicism that preceded it. And in 1547, under the secretly abhorred yoke of hierarchy, it imagined it could testify its aversion for the tyrant of the day by adopting a Bernese fashion of breeches slashed at the knees. So you couldn't speak out against Calvin, and so you had to do it in subtle ways. And so one of the ways was to adopt a style of dressing that was per a more liberty-minded city. Because of Calvin's hatred for Bern was known. Oh, that's the sentence. Because Calvin's hatred of Bern was known. So these are liberty-loving people. They start dressing like these people. Immediately, he had this fashion forbidden by an edict. Calvin's banning dress codes because he doesn't like the dress codes. The man is a psychopath. Okay, so let's
so bizarre.
Yeah, let's hear Lewis.
It's like,
yeah, go for it.
You get this narrative that like the Puritan Calvinists, and I'm not much of a history person, but that like in New England, for instance, that they were very like austere, they didn't dress, they dressed very modestly and all this other different stuff. And it's kind of connected to this whole Reformed tradition. But it's interesting that he seems to have kind of manufactured through control this, at least in Geneva, this like these modest restrictions or whatever.
So, like, Calvin is really a Stalin figure before Stalin existed. And so Stalin used networks of spies, he used informants, he used denunciations, public apologies, false trials, false confessions. Calvin tortured people into confessing. We'll maybe, if we got time, get to one of those episodes. But the secret police, the statements of faith that you have to adhere to, denunciations of not just people but ideas associated. Like, Servetus is bad, so killing him must be good. Unless you say killing Servetus was good, you're of the party of Servetus. You're an evil person. You must be put down. Like, these are really Stalinist tactics that Calvin adopts. Calvin, Pontiff of Geneva, this is Louis Villant, by supreme authority had matters over religion, became a dictator. By the authority he knew how to take in the government. Nothing was done against his advice. Everything was done once he had commanded it. The French refugees easily maintained his power and were protected by it in their turn. Under him, they had become the masters of the city. Thus the Genevans did not even gain, by their revolt and their apostasy, the ability to govern themselves at home. That they had liberty before Calvin came on scene. They had liberty for the most part under Catholicism and under the Duke. And so this was part of their tradition. They throw off Catholicism, they throw off the Dukes to gain more liberty, and then Calvin comes in and subverts it all and turns it into a hellscape that people are fleeing from. All right, we'll keep playing. Or we might only get through one video today. You gotta forget more. Go to your wife and say, "Hey, I need another hour," and force it out of her.
And instituted draconian laws. The children of Geneva saw their freedom slipping away, and they rose up in anger. Bloodshed seemed near, but Ami Perrin, Captain General of Geneva, stepped forward. He seized the syndic's staff, the symbol of civic authority, and used it to command order. Perrin stopped the violence. That night, the 4 syndics in the small council heard him praised for saving the city. But then Calvin went to work. By morning, the story had changed. Calvin framed Perrin's act as an attempt to seize power. The man who saved Geneva from bloodshed was branded a traitor. The children of Geneva were rounded up, tortured into confessions, and executed.
Okay, so let's. So this is coming straight from Bullsick's account. Now Bullsick's living in Bern, and that's where Ami Perrin flees. Like, these people have access to each other for this account. Let's hear Watts, and Watts is that neutral individual who had put together all the constitutory records. Let's hear him recount this affair, and it needs to be pointed out, this rebellion of the children of Geneva, no one's hurt. No one is killed. There might be like one guy hurt or something like that. It's like a January 6th incident. The only people died in January 6th were 2 protesters killed by cops. And then it turns into this political witch hunt in order to weaponize it to destroy your opposition. Same thing happens here. There's no one really hurt. This is just people showing frustration. Here's Watts' version of the account. On the evening of May 16th, 1555, several prominent opponents of Calvin dined together. Skipping forward, these people just start going home their own ways. It says, some members of this group, no doubt, after supper, Vandal and Perrin parted companies with others who went for a stroll in the lower part of town. Some members of this group, no doubt under the influence of alcohol, got into a fight with Claude Dumont, a native of Savoy, and tumult ensued. A large number of people from both sides, many of them armed, taken to the streets. This fracas appears to have lasted no more than an hour, was quelled with relative ease, and resulted in one minor injury. In short, this incident was clearly a spontaneous ruckus, not an attempted insurrection. It's not a January 6th insurrection. It is a January 6th insurrection, because it's not an insurrection. That said, as Genevan historian Mande Rajet rightly asserted, it's certain that there is no other event in internal history of our city which has more serious and extensive consequences. Calvin weaponizes this. I added that part. Calvin weaponizes this. Evidence indicates that some prominent Perrenists, people followers of Amy Perrin, were trying to act as peacemakers during the disturbance. For example, in an attempt to restore order, Perrin himself at one point seized the baton of justice from the hand of the Syndic, the baton of justice. The majority in the government, which supported Calvin and his partisans, used this incident as a pretext to destroy the opposition. On May 24th, 1555, the small council ordered the arrest of 7 men, including Ami Perrin, but he and several others decided to flee Geneva on the same day. Although the evidence against them was meager, their decision to leave was wise considering the fates of those who remained. Burns sent a long letter in May 31st asking the Genevan authorities asking the Genevan authorities to grant safe conduct pass to the accused so that they could return and defend themselves in court. The Genevans, however, paid absolutely no attention to that request, and on June 3, just 2 weeks after the flight, they passed a sentence that Perrin, for having seized the Syndic's baton, only a Syndic was supposed to wield the baton, was to have his hand cut off. Then he, Sept, and 4 others were to be decapitated. They were to be quartered. Their heads and Perrin's hands were to be nailed to the gallows and their bodies left in 4 different sites of the city. Those like Perrin who fled were able to avoid execution, but others who remained in the city were not so fortunate. 2 brothers named Comparet had taken part in the melee and under torture confessed to sedition and implicated orders. Now, so the torture here is they take your hands, they tie them behind your back, and they suspend you from a rope, and then they tie rocks on your feet to just like force it. And if you try to resist and use your muscles to stop it, they'll take you up and they'll drop you and they'll like dislocate your arm and things like that. This is what they're doing to get confessions. So Calvin regularly tortures people into trying to give up names and try to admit to things. This is standard practice. This did not happen. This did not happen for Calvin. This is a Calvin institution. All right, so Philbert Berthelier on June 20th.
I have good news. I've been given more time, so I just typed your message, and she's all good. So we can ramble on for longer now.
God. Oof.
Phew.
All right, so Philbert Berthelier, I'm going to call him Philbert, but his name's Philibert Berthelier. Calvin's longtime adversary was among those who fled, but his brother, Francosus Daniel, remained, mistakenly believing he had nothing to fear. These people didn't do anything wrong. They don't have reasons to fear except for Calvin controls the government and has them killed.
So question about this. So people were really upset. This guy Perrin grabs this thing that's like symbolic of authority or whatever, and says like "Calm your fam," chill out or whatever.
He's like, remember, we are citizens. We are not like we don't do like George Floyd riots, burning down Minneapolis. We are the citizens of Geneva. Like we're the ones who care about civility and structure. He calms them down, he disperses them, and then he's made as the villain.
And then the Calvinists take him grabbing this thing as some kind of symbolic seditious thing or whatever, and then just turn that against them. And the execution and the quartering and stuff like that, is that normal for sedition? Or was that like trumped up? Because I know you've talked previously about some of Calvin trying to lower some punishments and increase other punishments. Do you have any idea about that?
Which is interesting. I think Calvin inherently is concerned about his own PR. And so I don't, when Calvinists are like, oh, he's such a nice guy, he wanted a Servetus beheaded instead of burned. I think he's doing that for himself. He doesn't want himself associated with burning someone to death because that looks a lot worse. It's a painful way to die. It looks a lot worse for him. He's doing all the things all the time for his own consideration. He pretends to be other people. He writes letters to his friends praising himself, pretending to be other people. The guy's an absolute sociopath. And so
who said that he wrote? Was that
Bolsik has this account. And Bolsik also has an account where he does this duplicitous tactic when a queen gives money to the poor, and then she sends a messenger and figures out that Calvin Calvin's embezzling this money. He's using this money for spies and to pay bribes and to put it into the pocket of notable people so that they're voting in his favor. They figure out that this money that they're giving for the poor is being squandered. Calvin does this thing where he writes 2 letters. He writes a nice letter to her and a mean letter to her. He reads the mean one out in public, and everyone thinks, oh yeah, he's getting her. And then he sends the nice one, and like the messenger's all confused, like this is not the one he read in public. He's just duplicitous, and he does things for his own image. And so that's one of these things. Oh, he's so nice. He wanted Servetus to have his head cut off instead of burned. He's doing that for himself. He's a narcissist to the extreme extent, and he's vindictive he's crazy vindictive. Okay, so we'll keep going on. His Franciscus Daniel and others were jailed and interrogated, about which Calvin declared in a letter to Farel, I hope that we will see in 2 days what torture will draw from their mouths. On September, this is how they get their confessions. So if you got someone confessing to something in Geneva, you don't believe it whatsoever. People under torture are going to say all sorts of things. And when they don't say the things, Calvin tortures them even more. All told, the skirmish resulted in the executions of 4 men. About 20 others fled Geneva to avoid capital punishment. Others were banished, forced to pay fines, and obliged to abdicate public offices. So this is him seizing power. This is literally him seizing power. The title of the video that Grok said was incorrect. The historian Roget argued convincingly that this violent purging of the Perronists was probably entirely avoidable as their defeat had already been assured by the elections of 1555 and the admission of so many new Borgios, or the citizens. Far from putting a brake on the passion that had been unleashed in Geneva, Calvin was blatantly stirring them up. This affair had been also bred an animosity among the Swiss Reformed towards Calvin and his church in Geneva. It especially ran the risk of provoking a definite rupture with Bern. From the point of view of Genevan politics, however, this incident undeniably enabled Calvin and his supporters to consolidate their power following the tumult of 1555. Oh, Calvin's not a citizen. He's got no power. The disability power of the consistory and of the church, especially in regard to the right to admit and exclude people from the supper, was no longer seriously questioned, even well after the reformers' death. This is Calvin seizing power in a January 6th type instance where he's weaponizing legitimate concerns of the people of Geneva that their rights are being stripped away and immigrants are flooding in to give power to an absolute tyrant. These are legitimate concerns. And so Bolsek has his version of events, and that's where he gives all the details about Aimé Perrin.
And this is an eyewitness to this stuff. I mean, this is a guy that used to live in Geneva that got banished for questioning.
Bolsek's already gone by this. So Bolsek is in
years
Bern
later
at this
after
point.
So
the Bolsek trial for predestination, because you get thrown in prison, you get tortured, things if you don't agree with the predestination. That was one of the criticisms of Calvin. It's like he believes in fatalism. So you'd think that he might be a little bit tolerant of people holding different views because they have no other choice, but he's the most vicious destroyer of anyone who has any contrary opinions than him. This is one of the criticisms of Calvin at his own day, his mental disconnect between the two. These people have no choice but to believe what they believe, yet he punishes dissent with ruthlessness and vigor.
And forgive my, again, historical ignorance here or whatever, but people often say, like you said, that Calvin was not a citizen, so he wasn't a Genevan citizen, so he didn't have any power or whatever. He's just a refugee immigrant.
People
type
are
thing.
liars.
But then what was his official position or known position at the time? Is he
he's the head of the church. And so I just did the review of that guy who's like, oh, Calvin is like, it's a brotherhood of equals. He's paid double every other minister in the city. He controls the funds for the poor. He has his. Not only is he paid double everyone else, he's given a house to live in. He has paid servants. All his
That's
furniture
so.
is bought for him.
You said that Grok, gets all of its information from stuff, and so it's not trained on primary sources. Because I asked about this, because I've also heard that John Calvin was very austere, very modest with his money and stuff like that. And it was basically just like, yeah, he got paid pretty much what other people got paid, and yet there are these other sources that indicate otherwise. That he was a very powerful, influential person.
Is there something that claim that he's paid what everyone else is paid?
I'll have to find it. Let me see if I can.
That would
Maybe you
be
can chat for
interesting
a little bit
because
and I can see.
those all should be public documents. Those documents still exist. His official salary, but in addition to his official salary, he'd go to the consistory where he'd get like free meals. He would be entertaining foreign delegates where he'd get free meals. He basically had all his food, accommodation, everything in his life paid for, and then he got a salary on top of that. And so where does this money go? One thing that Calvin loves is the finest wines ever. Like he's in Life of Betsa. So Betsa is a Calvin sycophant that just, oh, Calvin's the most pious person ever. Every single one of Calvin's enemies is an enemy of God. This is a common claim that Calvin makes. I don't have any enemies except for enemies of God. Anyone who disagrees with him slightly on anything is just an enemy of God. And so that he's like, oh, I'm so pious. I'm fighting for God when fighting for himself. But Betts is like, oh, he was so austere and yeah, he didn't take very much luxuries. He's dying of gout. Then he says he later says Calvin's dying of gout. The same guy who's saying that he lives like a non-luxurious life later exposes he's dying of gout. Part of his
Sorry,
symptoms.
gout is from like overeating.
It's from eating like the rich foods, like you get it if you're a king eating succulently. Gout
Right.
like no longer exists. I met a guy with gout though. I was like, oh, what's happened to your leg? He's like, I got gout. So I'm like, what? Who's got gout these days? And so Calvin had the finest wines in all of Geneva. Bolsek points this out. He says, go talk. Bolsek's writing within the lifetime of people who knew Geneva or knew Calvin. He said, go talk to all the old Genevans about his fine wine that he had. And so, like, these people are just liars. And so getting our sources from Calvinist sycophants writing about the life of Calvin. That's what all these modern Calvinists do. And then they say, oh, Calvin says he was humble. Oh, Betza says Calvin was humble. Like, go read his writings. You can see that these are obvious lies. And there is one account where Calvin reads
I mean,
his...
he says at one stage he says, "Whoever disagrees with me disagrees with the Holy Spirit."
Yeah.
Like that doesn't sound
That's-
very humble.
It's a
Like,
common
usually,
claim.
like we engaged here in these theological circles and stuff, and obviously we're very convinced that we're correct and that our perspective is true, but we're never going to say, like, if you disagree with me on this issue, then you're disagreeing with the Holy Spirit. Like,
So Calvin would
that would
be
be
at
crazy.
Calvin would be at dinners, and if someone said one thing against his teaching, even the slightest remark, he'd get out of the dinner, he'd storm off and leave the house and not come back. The man is a psychopath.
So here's ChatGPT on. I asked it, was John Calvin a very wealthy minister? And I must have asked ChatGPT previously because I think it gave me a similar answer. I couldn't find the actual chat, but it says the short answer is no. Few points of context. He received a salary from City of Geneva for his work as pastor and teacher, but it was not extravagant.
How
He
much?
owned a
What-
house, but
yeah.
it was
Okay, go ahead.
he owned a house, but it was provided for his use by the city rather than being a luxurious private estate. He accumulated a substantial library, which was valuable, but books were essential tools for a scholar and pastor in the 16th century. When he died in 1564, his estate was relatively small. His will lists ordinary possessions, and he left modest gifts to family, friends, and charitable causes. Historians generally do not regard his estate as an evidence of great wealth.
Well, ask how
So
much
it
he's
ca-
paid per year. Just say how much was he paid per year? It should be like 400 or 500 francs or whatever unit of money they got.
Yeah, it says 500 Geneva florins per year.
Yeah, and that's double of the other ministers. Just say how much was other ministers paid.
So it says, was 500 florins a lot? This is where it gets tricky. No exact modern dollar equivalent, but historians generally conclude it was well above the income of a laborer. It was roughly comparable to the salary of a respected university professor or senior civil official. It was far below the wealth of successful merchants, bankers, nobles, or bishops. So let's ask it, what's the average income of a minister?
Of a minister, yeah. So Bolsek reports he gets double everyone else. And he
Just
gives the
says there
numbers.
wasn't really.
So Bolsek
There-
is giving the numbers. He's giving them accurately, and he says it's double all these other ministers. Like, so he's reporting this as an extravagant salary in itself, and then talking about the paid benefits that he gets on top of it. So Bolsek is telling the truth here. And so one of the things is when these modern scholars, like, they contradict the people at the time. They're like, oh, Calvin had no power. The people getting pulled in front of Calvin's consistory, they think Calvin's persecuting them. They think he's psychotic and bloodthirsty. They think he's a dictator. The common claim that people are pulled in front of them for saying is that he's trying to make himself the Pope. They talk about kissing the slipper. When you see that phrase, kiss the slipper, that's like a Pope thing. You kiss the Pope's slipper. That's about Calvin. They're calling him a pope. They're calling him a tyrant. They're calling him bloodthirsty. People in Geneva, and we have these records. Why? Because Calvin was so petty that he pulled these people in for trials to accuse them when he heard these things going around. So these are the people who are brave enough to say these things in the first place. These people hate Calvin, the people of Geneva. He turns into this vicious tyrant that they can't say anything against, not even in a private. One guy was pulled in because there were some like people like passing by that heard him talking to himself, stray comment. And we don't know if they're passing by or if these are paid spies, because Calvin has paid spies all over the city. He's weaponizing the justice system. He's weaponizing his authority. He's moving in the shadows, and he's consolidating power. That's why Bolsek is not dead, is because he didn't have absolute control yet. That's why Servetus is dead, because Servetus called him out to his face, called him names to his face in public, very directly. And Calvin can't have that. And Castillo writes that it's safer to insult the King of France in his own court than it is to insult John Calvin. That's what's going on here. John Calvin is a psychopath. All right, I'm going to hit play on the video.
Perrin, warned of Calvin's treachery, fled to Bern, where they saw through Calvin's lies. 16th century.
Yeah, and remember, they wanted to send Perrin back to give him his own defense and explain what happened. Geneva didn't allow it. Why? Because Geneva's in Calvin's power. This is not about these executions. These trials are not about the actual events. They're about solidifying power for Calvin. That's what's happening. This is a January 6th event. You're only allowed to show the footage from January 6th that boosts the Democrat narrative. You're not allowed to show exculpatory evidence for the defendants. They're not allowed access to those videos. This is what is literally happening in Geneva. All right. So is this video? Yeah, is this video? Do you think my 60 seconds is accurate or inaccurate?
And I guess the main objection to all of this is just people want to discount Bolsek as this like papist polemicist that's unreliable.
Yeah, what in the video is specifically Bolsek's? It only seems to be the claim about what Ami Perrin did with the staff. That's specifically Bolsek. But everything else is relying on other people. There's Watts. You have Watts, a respected, seems to be a neutral scholar, giving a very clean history events that line up exactly with what this video says. And so even if Bolsek is taken out of the picture, you got respective scholar Watts on this saying basically the exact same things. So that book is free, by the way. If you go to Google and put Calvin's Consistory Geneva, it'll be maybe like the first or second link. It's a free book that you could read. that's what pointed me to there's no laughter here anymore in Geneva. That's what pointed me to the guy losing his job for saying Calvin's a hothead. He's the guy who understands the records, who understands what people are being tried for. So
I'm trying to find the what was the video where you said that people wore images of Calvin?
yes, this is I think this is coming from Bolsec. I've read so much material that sometimes where I read something, images. Yeah.
Because I commented underneath the video and said, like, bro, this cannot be for real. And I don't remember which video it was.
Yeah. Yeah. People started wearing images of Calvin around their neck. Okay.
The miracle fraud one is pretty wild too.
Yeah. So that's a Bolsec. Okay. Now, if this argument is not okay, I think this is Bolsec. Yep, this is Bolsec. I'll be able to say this is not an instance or pursuit of the said Calvin, since he was okay. He's called gentle, kind, and humble, but this is not true. But in his own words, in the letter which he wrote, Master Pierre Viet, on the day of the Ides of February in the year 1546, which I have recited above, I'll show written in his own hand, when there is need, testify well enough that Calvin himself had him put in prison and would not pardon the said Amu until he made honorable amends to him, as had been said. What ambition and barbarous arrogance is this in a minister, not permit people freely to say what they think of him? Now, if this argument is not sufficient, I ask whether it's a sign of humility and abjection of vainglory to have oneself painted and to permit one's portrait and image to be attached to public places in Geneva and carried around the necks of certain fools and women who made him their god. If Betts and other of their sect answers me that the said Calvin knew nothing of it, I'll call God to witness that they will speak against the truth of their conscience. For this was wholly common and public in Geneva. It was remonstrated to him by the words of people with worth and authority. Moreover, it was reported to him by letters that having condemned and caused to be struck down the images of the saints, of the Virgin Mary, even that of Jesus Christ, it was no honor to him to let his own be set up in public and carried around the neck, and that at least Jesus Christ was well worth as much as he. To this he made no other answer, except that whoever was vexed by it could burst from spite. He had his image replace images of Jesus.
Is this from Bolsec again?
This is from Bolsec, who lived in Geneva. He's calling people publicly to account for things that are within the lifetime of everyone reading this. Like these things are easy to go verify. And so he's not making things up. So when you're reading Bolsec is not like Betza. Like Bolsec tells you like where he's getting things. Like, oh, we heard this rumor. This was a rumor. Oh, I read this actually in the Red Book. I read this in the laws. I read this in the letter. So like he's giving you the sources for these things. This is not a typical activity of someone who's just like making up lies. He's asking for verifications, and this is long enough that like if there's like these blatant errors that apparently existed, you should be able to strike this down. So here's one thing so ChatGPT and Grok are both haters of Bolsec, and they've bought this Calvinist lie that he's unreliable. And you ask, hey, what's one proven lie that he's stated? They only got one, and they claim it's Calvin's homosexuality. Like, so if he's not lying on that, then all these people who are disparaging him and calling him a liar, so they got nothing. They got nothing.
And that's probably my main question with Bolsec, or would be my main question, is that you can't dismiss him as a dirty papist or whatever. You have to point to some other things that he's lied that makes him unreliable. And if that's the only thing,
and then we could go look at it. Yeah, we could look at it. We could see if he's lying or not. And if he's being discounted by all these people and that's his lie, and the evidence that that's a lie is really terrible evidence, then we know that all these people dismissing him, They themselves are pundits. That they don't care about the truth.
So this is, I feel like we're dropping like the breadcrumbs for the gay thing, and like
Right.
we're
So
like on our way to it.
so let's go read. So in the latest source book that is published, you could go grab it right now. You could go read it. Bolsek is republished by this Catholic individual, and let's see what he says about Bolsek. Okay, he says time has rehabilitated Bolsek. So back in the 1800s, he's saying that Bolsek is actually being trusted now. Time has rehabilitated Bolsek at the expense of Betza and other apologists of Calvin. A Genevan who doubtlessly read in the archives of his native city the Red Book to which Bolsek refers the reader in order to prove the truth of what he advances, renders a striking homage to the good faith of a historian accused for 2 centuries, and especially by Bale, of being an odious pamphleteer. Most of the facts related by the lionized physician, says Galiffi, the guy who actually competent historian, are perfectly true. I do not believe he knowingly lied, as Calvin panegyrists, his haliographers, have done at almost every point and still do. The Calvinists lie. Bolsek is not a liar. By comparing all the writings and historical monuments that relate to Calvin, one arrives at this forced conclusion that there is much more truthfulness in the spirit of the vindictive Bolsek than the panegyric of Betza, a discipline and successor of the reformer Calvin. We may add, with Dr. Galiffi, that one can with difficulty form an idea of the prodigious quantity of falsehoods refuted by Protestants themselves, which the reformers Calvin and Betza found means to heap upon their victims, and Bolsek was one of them. But Calvin is always operating in propaganda campaigns. And so when I publish volume 4, you're going to actually read the back and forth with a guy who grew up thinking like of Calvin as a father, and how vindictive and spiteful and mean and accusatory Calvin is. Calvin is trying for character assassination at someone who is his friend. But all right, so modern historians are like, oh, Bolsek says these things and they're false. And why are they false? Because they don't like what he's saying. They don't actually have a reason to claim that they're false. They have a couple reasons, but we could talk about those reasons. But let's kind of watch the video first.
There is no laughter here.
Oh, that's the wrong one. All right, it's this one.
Was John Calvin a homosexual? Maybe.
Yep, Bolsek's claim, he doesn't claim John Calvin was a homosexual. His claim is actually historical, and so I'll let this play out too. So when they say, "Oh, Bolsek claimed Calvin's a homosexual," no, he didn't. He didn't claim it. That's not the substance of his claim.
When a young servant boy fled with $123,000 worth of the supposedly austere Calvin's goods, people rumored that the reason Calvin did not pursue was to hide his relationships with servant boys.
Okay, so Bolsek reports this. He reports it as rumors. And so there's this very strange. So how much did it say? I used ChatGPT to take the florins amount and convert it into US dollars. So let's say a servant of yours steals $123,000. This stuff is just laying around in Calvin's house. And so remember when your things like, oh, he's living austere, he's so poor. He's got like I don't have $123,000 of stuff laying around in my house. But the servant boy takes this amount, and that's not his total amount that Calvin has. And he flees, and then like Calvin lets him go. And so people are confused by this, and they're like, wonder why is he letting him get away? And then the homosexuality rumors like come back into play. They're like, okay, maybe he's doing something with these servant boys. Bolsek is reporting accurately rumors in Geneva about Calvin and his relationship with this servant boy. And so when Bolsek reports rumors, he labels them as rumors. Oh, 1 second.
Which if you were just going to lie about that and you were going to make it up, you wouldn't say that it's a rumor. You would just say, this is what happened, you know? I mean, it's pretty. I mean, trying to be charitable and skeptical here and stuff. I don't know, but I guess I'm just saying that that would be a very excellent lie if he was intending to get people to believe that he was a homosexual and did it through saying it's a rumor instead of just saying this is true and this is what happened.
Okay, so there is a pamphlet. So Bolsek is publishing in like 1570. I don't know the exact date, but like a decade after Calvin dies. But and if you ask ChatGPT, it's like, oh, Bolsek first started this rumor and he made it up in his life of no, it's actually. And ChatGPT will probably, if you're working with ChatGPT, it'll catch on to that these are earlier rumors that were circulating during the lifetime of Calvin. There's a Calvin pamphlet that doesn't exist in digitized form, but there's an individual who actually reads through it and talks about it, and I have his paper with extracts on this account. But it uses this vague language, just like referring to this rumor with innuendo, because the rumor is known. People know this rumor, and so they could put pieces together when referring to it with innuendo. And so there are some claims that this pamphlet was written by Bolsek himself and then distributed, but this is within Calvin's lifetime that this is being distributed. And so that's interesting. So like a lot of times when you're using AI to try to give you histories, it doesn't know these vague nuances in when things are happening and what's happening and in what time. Like the chat will say, oh, Bolsek is the one who started all these rumors about Calvin's homosexuality. They were in circulation provably well before Bolsek. Bolsek is reporting, he's collecting things. He's collecting rumors. He's collecting some ideas from the people in Geneva. Geneva's not a free speech city. These people can't go out there and say, hey, servant boy, you do whatever. Bolsek points out the fact that this servant boy was known to have this huge amount of cash, and he was spending it all over the place, and everyone was wondering where he got all this cash from. Like, people, this is within the memory of the people that he's writing to. And so that's his addition to this story. And so, did it happen? Absolutely, Calvin got robbed from. Why didn't Calvin chase this guy down? Well, it could be because he was doing weird stuff with servants, but there could be other reasons. We have to remember he was an embezzler. Calvin was taking public funds and making political bribes and payments. Where'd this money come from? Was it part of Calvin's embezzlement? What was that what's gonna be exposed? We don't know. It's like, why didn't you chase down this person who stole over $100,000 from you, Calvin? What's the reason? Could it be because he was molesting servant boys? Could have been. Could have been for other reasons. He is a very corrupt and evil person, and so could be. But okay, so that part of the video is accurate. These rumors did exist, and it's not, these rumors not unfounded. The underlying events happened. The explanation is what's in question. And so,
Right.
Bolsek cites it as a rumor, and so we should. What are they trying to say? If they're like, oh, he's lying, but he's lying that there's a rumor. There's a lot of rumors.
The family Berthelier would soon face Calvin's wrath for securing from Noyon reports that Calvin was punished for sodomy in his youth, the punishment being downgraded from death to a burn mark.
Okay, so this is one of the biggest claims with a lot of moving parts. And so Bolsek's claim is not that Calvin was sodomite in his youth. His claim is that Berthelier retrieved from Noyon a certified notarized letter that claimed that Calvin engaged in sodomy in his youth and was burned on the arm for it. And this we were talking about this earlier. It was weird when Calvin died, no one was allowed to see his body. they shut up his body and hid his body, and then they buried him in an unmarked grave. And they said it's for piety reasons, but no one's allowed access to his body, and so there's not a chance to verify or confirm. I'm not saying that's why the reason why they hid his body. It could be because he's really gross and disgusting from everything he is dying from. It could be. But Bolsek's claim is that he saw the notarized letter in the hand of Bert Lear. And so where did this letter originate? So is he lying? I don't think he's lying. I think he saw this letter. So what is this letter, and where did it come from? It's coming from a Catholic city. Maybe they just don't like Protestants, and they are fabricating false rumors. That's a possibility. Maybe it's a different John Calvin. We already talked about Galify and him saying, yeah, there's probably a confusion between multiple John Calvins. That could be the case. Let's actually go to the footnotes. So if you go by the volume 3, there's a whole footnote in which the author talks about this claim, and we could kind of go through it.
I went on to Amazon and I looked up Life of Calvin Bolsek, and your book is the very first one that shows
because
up.
it's not exist. Yeah, it doesn't exist. It does not exist until I pushed it out. So all these AIs have not been trained on this material because it doesn't exist to be trained on, and so it's not in their data set. All right, so maybe I'll just do a search on Nyon. Okay.
I wanted to try to visit Noyon when I don't know how to say that. I don't speak French, but I wanted to visit Nyon just because when we were in the area, but it was just too far to justify from where we were at. We did make it over to Geneva for a day because it was so incredibly expensive. Where I bought John Calvin's Institutes as a souvenir for my trip to Geneva, and then I left it in France.
Oh, so man, that's terrible. So there's a really funny scene in one of these shows where it's like Jennifer, who's that, like Latita girl or whatever?
Jennifer Lopez?
Yeah, I think it is. And then like her boyfriend is like, I know you like books, so I got you an autographed first edition. He hands it to her, and she looks at it, and it's the Iliad. Like. It's just like, oh, thank you. What is happening here? Oh. So maybe you got an autographed first edition of Institutes. Calvin rewrote his Institutes and had the earlier ones burned and destroyed. And Castillo calls him out on this because in the earlier versions, he was against executing heretics. He changes his mind and tries to rewrite history, basically. Okay, so here is the comments, the notes. This is why this book is such a great find, is because this this Catholic republisher put all sorts of notes and points you to all sorts of references, so you could just like read a lot of these details. On the Fleur des Marques, Cardinal Rely wisely says, what ought to pass for indubitable conviction of the crimes imputed to Calvin is that since he was charged with this occasion, the Church of Geneva not only has not justified the contrary, no one's denied it, but has not even denied the inquiry which Bert Lear, sent by those of the same city, made at Noyon. They're not denying that they would go check up on the people who are ministers and pastors and do character references stuff. They do not deny even sending him. The inquiry was signed by the most notable men of Nyon, has been made with all the ordinary forms of justice.
So the Beltelier dude, he was sent to Nyon to investigate this.
That's the idea. It seems to be what's happening here. It doesn't seem to be like a personal vendetta or anything like that. It says it's been made with all ordinary forms of justice. And in the same inquiry, one sees that this heresiarch, the arch-heretic, having been convicted of an abominable crime, which is punished only by fire, the penalty which he deserved was, at the prayer of his bishop, moderated to the Fleur Dries. Okay, so I think I sent you the document where we go through in more summary form come to these arguments. I'm going to just turn to that.
That's such a specific lie. Like, I saw this guy and he had a letter in his hand, and it was signed by all of these really notable people, and he also had downgraded from death to a branding of this particular thing. That's so specific.
Okay, so why is this search is always so stupid?
Because was the you sent this to me in a chat, but it was like 40 some odd notable people who had put their name on the dotted line on this conviction. Was that in the letter that
That's supposed to be the letter that was
Bertelier found?
seen. And so
Right.
the claim was that all these people of Noyon had signed this letter and notarized it.
Right.
Okay. Oh, I do have extracts from the individual who goes over the letters that talk about the servant boy thing. Let's see if there's any notable parts we want to read.
Chris must be like a really good scanner of information, because I would be stuck for ages trying to find this stuff.
Yeah. All right. Okay, let's actually move to the book called The Shadow of Rousseau. Now this is a book that is mentioned in the footnotes of this instance. And The Shadow of Rousseau gives multiple arguments why this is maybe even a credible claim. And so his argument has several parts. Stapleton gives a precise claim, not a vague slander. Now, Stapleton is a Catholic priest. He's preaching in the area of Nyon, and I found his sermon, and I got his sermon, and I have his claims. I'll read it real quick. Where did it run off to? Okay. This is Stapleton, and this is like 2 decades after Calvin's death. I don't know the exact date right offhand. Is this modesty, or rather are they so shameless that they so glory in their very greatest disgrace of their own people, which Calvin, acting here not as an interpreter of sacred scripture, but as a buffoon of old comedy, thinks may be cast about with impunity as reproach. With the same modesty he uses in his institutes, he thinks this is about the whole ecclesiastical order. Sometimes I say our words wrong. Ecclesiastical. There we go. This is a quote. Nothing more dishonorable can be imagined than this order, more unbridled and dissolute, and gorging itself with all luxuries. That's like a Calvin quote. Moreover, since he throws not one stone at one man, but rolls down such huge rocks upon the whole ecclesiastical order, is he himself without sin? Is he so chaste and pure that he has been touched by no vice or incontinence? Even to this day, let the record chest and monuments of public acts of the city of Nyon in Picardy be inspected. In them, even today, it is read that this John Calvin, convicted of sodomy through the indulgence of the bishop and magistrate, was marked only with a brand on the back and departed from the city. Nor have the most honorable men of his family still surviving, though they have tried down until now, been able to obtain that memory of this deed, which imprints some stain upon the whole family, to be erased from the civic monuments and records. He's saying that the family of Calvin keeps trying to erase all these records. They exist in Nyon, and you could read about his conviction of sodomy. And he's right next to the city. But also when Calvin was ruling at Geneva, to such a degree indeed that for several years the keys of the city were in his possession, that he had his own Adonis too, and gave himself to secret lusts, is attested by the flight of a boy from Calvin's house, loaded with Calvin's whole silver household plate. Calvin did not wish either to drag him back from the flight or investigate him by any track at all, as Bolsec writes in his life. There also may be other notable stratagems of this impure and wicked scoundrel which are recounted. Okay, so Shadow of Rousseau kind of breaks down this argument. Stapleton's giving precise claims. He's not giving vague slander. Writer says Stapleton does not merely say people claim Calvin was moral. He says there's public records showing Calvin was convicted of an abominable crime, spared from burning, branded on the back, fled city. Stapleton, he invites verification. For the passage emphasizes that Stapleton already points readers to public registers of Noyon. The writer treats this as important because the person would supposedly not make such a checkable claim unless he is confident. He's close enough in time and place to know. Author says Stapleton was Calvin's contemporary, wrote only decades after Calvin's death, and lived in Louvain, not far from Nyon. Therefore, he could have verified the story himself. Stapleton is presented as a reliable witness. The writer insists that Stapleton was a learned, pious, moderate, not a merely a fanatical or obscure polemist. His point is to make his testimony seem weightier than ordinary anti-Calvin slander. And the accusation predates Bolsec. And so these are existing claims.
I asked ChatGPT about the polemicist thing, by the way, like with Bolsec. What were the other polemicist I like that word.
Polemicist,
pamphleteering that he engaged in, and it says that his major polemical efforts include his attacks on predestination. So before writing any biographies, Bolsec became famous by publicly attacking Calvin's doctrine of predestination during a Friday theological lecture in Geneva in 1551. He argued that unconditional predestination made God the author of sin and undermined human responsibility. So it wasn't a published pamphlet. Initially, it was a public disputation. And if I'm not mistaken, this was what resulted in him being banished from Geneva.
Oh, the predestination, yes.
Yeah.
So he interrupted a service, like the service was over. Then he stood up and was criticizing predestination. And Calvin had slipped into the service. He wasn't preaching, but he was in the back of the room, which infuriated Calvin. And then Calvin had him hauled off to prison. I think he spent 3 months in prison over this affair. You talk against predestination, you go to prison.
And then the other polemicist stuff is The Life of Calvin. Most famous work wasn't simply a biography; it was sustained character assassination intended to discredit Calvin personally, and by extension, Calvinism. It accuses Calvinism of pride, tyranny, greed, hypocrisy, cruelty, sexual immorality, and even suggests various crimes.
If those things are true,
if it's true, then it's not polemical. It's just he's just saying he was a terrible person.
and so the thing is, we have people in Geneva, the records of what they're saying about Calvin, because they're pulled into trial for saying these things. And so they in a coincidental way, Calvin created a record of what common people thought about him, that he was bloodthirsty, that he was a murderer, that he was a dictator, that he had a hot head, a violent temper. He creates his own record of what common people think. And so you can't just say, oh, these people are just making things up. We know what's there. We know the people of the time. The people who are writing these things have personal dealings and relations with Calvin. Calvin tries to kill him. So these people know what they're talking about. And so when a modern person comes on a podcast or whatever, it's like, well, we just got to understand the times. And if you look at the way the Genevan government was set up and this thing and this thing, and then they had this council, and Calvin didn't actually have the people at the time don't agree with you. It's like, you guys are you're terrible historians.
You made a good point. You made a good point about if this was happening, then how many people were killed for heresy during this? How many people were killed just for thought crimes? And it's no one.
Oh, okay, no. For heresy one, Servetus. For thought crimes, all those children of Geneva were killed for thought crimes. There's maybe 40 people or more that Calvin's executing through personal grudges. But for heresy, only one.
Right.
And so all the children of Geneva are killed for Calvin's for his hatred. And there's an individual. So if you get that volume 3, let me pull up volume 3. I'm going to lose my place. Okay, I'm on page 106, so we got to go back to there. If you grab that and you turn to Gruet, there's a whole writing on Gruet. Gruet's another person that's killed for thought crime. And does Bolsec? No, in the Calvin Consistory by Watts, he gives the whole Gruet case and account. And then I had to go find extra details myself because sometimes people aren't very specific with the details. But Gruet comes in Calvin's bad grace because Calvin, in part of Calvin's tirades against people, they're attacking Gruet's friend. Is this Gruet? And I'm thinking I might be confused. It's got to be Gruet. And so then Gruet defends his friend against the minister and says that his friend's more righteous than the minister. If not, he's going to give his cloak. And this starts off this cascading Calvin hatred and persecution of Gruet. Remember, pastors could call you out by name on the pulpit. They could say any bad thing they want against you, no matter how harsh. You're not allowed to clap back. You're not allowed to say anything bad back about any of these people. You're met with imprisonment. You're met with torture, with whipping. Gruet was in prison until he is forced to repent and recant, and then he's executed without any evidence that he wrote a note. Calvin himself, there's a note that's left that condemns the ministers, and he's executed. And Gruet's executed for that. Calvin himself admits it's not even in his handwriting. It was just a personal vendetta. It was another murder by Calvin. And so Calvin, within Geneva, has a reputation of being a bloodthirsty murderer, and people are called to account for saying it. They say what everyone knows, and then are hauled before the tribunals. All right, so let's go back to 106. 106, we got some footnotes. All right, so Verus speaks of 2 inquiries which were made at Nyon by Atubes under the reign of Francis I, in which 48 irreproachable witnesses testify, other by Henry II, signed by 52 witnesses and containing principal circumstances, which are like in the first. So there's multiple inquiries that are made into the veracity of these claims, claimed by Catholics. And so a lot of times the Catholics are just counted just because they're Catholic. So take this or leave it. But the interesting thing is that I think it's in the Shadow of Rousseau where he points out that the evidence that these documents actually existed at Noyon was so strong that the Calvinist apologists said, hey, these could be fabricated documents because Noyon is really, really bad at record keeping. They keep everything loose leaf, and there's not a systematic way to keep records. Now, fast forward to today, and everyone's saying, oh, there's no records of this ever happening at Nyon. And so the Calvinist apologists before were saying these documents exist, but they're fabricated because the documents are sparse and not taken care of, and it's really bad state. Apologists today say these documents don't exist, therefore it didn't happen.
So what you just read in terms of the 48 people who signed and 52 people or whatever,
I think those are people that are just attesting to an inquiry that's made.
Is that from Bolsec as well?
No, that's a Verus. I don't know what date Verus is, but we could.
And you were saying that the Calvinists, like the Calvinist apologists,
yeah,
they investigated this and said that they found these records, or that they admitted that they existed,
well,
but that they're fabricated
because
they're
seem,
not maintained?
No, they seem to accept the fact that these records exist. No one's ever seen these records in Nyon. We don't have any accounts of anyone seeing the actual trial records. We have Stapleton saying that these records exist and anyone could go see them. Decades.
And he lived close by to Noyon, like he had the ability to go and check himself.
And he lived at the time of Calvin. Like these
right.
He's a couple decades after Calvin's death. He's preaching, and so he seems to think they exist. But we have no one who just says, "I read the documents and they exist." We have no one like that. So, did these documents ever exist? Stapleton seems to think that they exist at his time. Calvinists today say they never existed, but the thing is that Nyon has such shabby records that it doesn't seem like any real record keeping existed to have had these. Their biggest claim on this thing is that John Calvin is such a notable personage that these documents would have been found and reproduced and propagated. So that's probably their biggest piece of evidence that these documents never existed. But
So their argument that it never existed
is that we just don't
is
have them right
that
now.
there existed too many of them because it was propagated, or that the rumor was propagated?
Okay, so they think this is a false rumor. They think that Calvin was never punished for sodomy, and their claim is because there's no trial records, there's no verdict records, there's no notary records that one would expect to come along with these types of legal events. Like, we have a lot of trial records from Geneva. We have all the constitutory records. We have the records of the councils. I have a lot of those records. They're fairly well. A lot of them are vague and kind of just like handwritten notes about things, but these records exist in some sort of record-keeping system that we still have access to. They're saying that if Calvin's sodomy downgrading of a punishment were to have happened, there'd be criminal records that we would have found at some point. And so,
Right.
so people like Voltaire was going around trying to pull up Calvin records with the Servatus Fair in mind. Voltaire actually thinks, and maybe it's not Voltaire, maybe it's Rousseau. He's like, yeah, Calvin's a homosexual, no big deal. So let's go through more of these footnotes. Did the records exist? Stapleton thinks they exist. He was contemporary who lived in that area. Did they exist? Maybe. Did Bolsek see a notarized note from Nyon? I think so. The Stapleton claim's interesting because the Stapleton claim talks about what current residents of Nyon kind of think, and Calvin's family's efforts to get these records destroyed, removed, taken away. And so we got to factor that into our considerations as well.
Because in the quote from Stapleton, he's saying, "Oh, you think John Calvin is so holy? He thinks he's so holy. You're telling me he's never had any sins that he's ever struggled with or been besetted with or whatever? Well, what about this particular thing that happened just over here in this town nearby, only a couple of decades after his death?" Is that basically what he's saying?
Yeah, basically. And so John Calvin, and note how he talks about John Calvin, that John Calvin is a dictator and a tyrant. Like, these Calvinists, like, they know who this guy is and what he is. And our modern apologists will say, oh, he had no power. He did nothing. Everyone knows. Everyone knows. All right, so let's go through some more of these footnotes. Okay, so there's a claim by the Catholics that this claim was investigated by the Catholics and confirmed. There is the next claim is that Meyerberg shows us that he displays little exactness in all he said concerning Calvin's morals. Bale and other modern Calvinists have resorted to 1,000 shifts in order to obscure this fact. They have not justified Calvin, but raised some difficulties about details, and above all have imagined the system of imputing everything to Bolsek. Voltaire, so here's the Voltaire quote. It is Persil, Canto 8, granted that the Calvinists a pardon for the crime imputed to Calvin, but it did not deny the accusation maintained by men as learned as Lessus et Retiel. All right. It's not only here's the next point. It's not only at Nyon that Calvin's contemporaries accuse him of having depraved morals. So these accusations of depravity are current in Geneva, and it's not just this one instance. All right. Okay, so here's another note. Like, the note's not all pro these things existed. This is the Galify note. Galfy, a learned and conscientious Genevan author, expressed the opinion that the vices wrongly reproached to Calvin from his youth concerned another member of the Noyon family bearing the same baptismal name as the reformer. So there's a possibility. It could be the case that these documents existed and that it's just someone else and the name's confused. But then if the Bolsek's account is true, where Bolsek sees the letter and the letter is notarized and signed by a bunch of individuals, are they misremembering the wrong Calvin? Are they remembering the right Calvin? That's the question. That's another question.
Yeah, because if it was another John Calvin that actually was convicted in Noyon, which is alleged to be his nephew, then, sorry, maybe I'm just restating all this for my own sake, but then that would mean that that lends credence towards Bolsek seeing this notarized letter, but that it was just a letter about another John Calvin, potentially. But then you have to ask yourself the question, like, I don't know how this stuff worked, right? Like, if you have the same first and last name, how do you identify one another and stuff?
Galfy's not basing this on anything. This is just him admitting that this is conjecture. He says, right. Our impartiality obliges us to mention this opinion, which we have no means of checking. We also know that it is the opinion of Levasseur, who also undertook to justify Calvin. And so he's just speculating here.
Right.
So let's go to Mugjugs over here says, if the records existed, why don't we have them? He seems to say it's because they didn't keep records, and the Catholic investigators turned them. It's not like that Noyon didn't keep records. Remember, the pro-Calvin people said that it would have been easy to fabricate these records against Calvin because of Noyon's extremely poor record keeping. Yeah, so the Calvin apologists are claiming Noyon has extremely poor record keeping and claiming that the documents exist, but they're fabricated. It's the modern Calvinists who are like, oh, these records don't exist. So that proves, again, when you ask anyone at ChatGPT or Grok why Bolsek is unreliable to state one lie that he told, this is what they point to. And their evidence is, oh, we don't have the records. And so It's like you're claiming he's lying, but you actually haven't proved that he lied. It's like an argument from silence, and there's other reasons that we might not have these records. So my challenge to the Calvinists is to grab me a record from that time frame of any single person, no matter who, from Noyon, who engaged in sodomy, to see if that even exists. It's like we have records of people engaging in sodomy in Geneva. Part of this video talks about Calvin writing a letter trying to justify or downgrade the punishment from death for homosexual pedophiles. And so these are things that I found. No one's ever mentioned this letter to me. It's not in any of these people claiming Calvin's a homosexual. I found this letter. I'm like, what is going on here? This is a very strange, weird letter.
So who is this letter from? From John Calvin?
John Calvin. We'll get to it. We'll hit play real quick. Okay, let's see if there's any other arguments. For examination of this historical question, see the Shadow of Rousseau. Yeah, that gives some interesting facts. Okay, so it does give a list of names. And so AI is going to be wrong on this. It'll say that Bolsek made up all these claims. But in these footnotes, it lists names and dates of people who've made these claims. It says, the author there seriously discusses the numerous probabilities of the crime imputed to Calvin and establishes Bolsek's truthfulness by numerous documents. Furthermore, he proves the accusation had already been brought by Sirius, 1566, by Turbs under Francis I and Henry II, by Simon Fontes in 1557, by Stapleton in 1558, by Lavicure in 1561, by D. Mochi in 1562, by Pierre in 1569, by Whitaker before 1570. And despite the existence of these various authors, all of whom appeared before 1577, the time of the publication of Bolsec's writings, the Calvinists obstinately persist in wishing to regard him as the sole authority, the foundation of this terrible accusation. You'll find this in the modern Calvinists too. They're like, oh, this is all lies made up by Bolsec. Bolsec's just writing down things that are already going around about Calvin. He's not making them up.
So all of those people and those dates that you shared are given by Bolsec as people that have said that they also attested that this happened.
So we read the claims are claims in the form of Stapleton. Stapleton's name's in the list. We read what he said about it, and so
Right.
not all these people. I don't think all these people, their claims exist anymore. I'm not. I
Right.
haven't pulled up every single one of these people's claims, but
And how
Stapleton
many
was
of
very
those-
interesting.
I got into it on X with a guy. I'm not sure whether he was a Calvinist or not, but about this different list of names. And I'm just looking here. John Calvin died 1564. How many of those dates are like during Calvin's lifetime? Because there was a good handful from what I remember. Like,
Okay, so Mugja says, where's that list from? Well, luckily, you could go buy it right now on Amazon. Just search the Calvin Servetus Sourcebook, Life of Bolsec, and you could get the full publication with references, all translated in English for your consumption.
oh, this is Mug Judge. So we've been going back and forth with him a little bit on X. He's not a Calvinist, but I sent him this broadcast when he was asking
okay.
about like.
So it's
the
all
other-
available. It's all translated for you, and you could go double check all the sources. The footnotes are very interesting. The footnotes are coming from the republication of Bolsec's work by what's the guy's name? By Louis Francis Chastel, who did a lot of work in putting together a lot of references concerning Bolsec's claims. All the footnotes that we're going to be finding in Bolsec's life are coming from him. He gives evidence, and he talks about if things are true or false, and he adds other people's opinions, and he points to a lot more sources. And so his notes about this homosexual instance, they're very replete. There's a lot he has to say, and it's not all that Calvin did it. There's some defenses, like maybe it's a different Calvin, maybe the Catholics are making up things, and so those things exist as well. Let me. Where were we? 106 is page 106. All right. So from all this results that Bolsec reported only a generally accepted fact affirmed to him by Bertlier, who had seen the inquiries, and that even if the fact were false, which was one is permitted to doubt, Bolsec's good faith would be entirely justified. So Bolsec's not lying here, unless you think that he's lying about seeing a notarized letter in the hands of Bertlier. And Bertlier never denies this in his lifetime, even though Bertlier is living at the same place. He gets exiled as well to Bern. He has to flee Calvin. Calvin's trying to kill this guy. I'm not posting that comment, Jamie. All right. So my claim in the video is not false. Bolsec does claim to see this letter. Let's go see the claim. And this is we've already read Calvin's hatred of these brothers, and I think a lot of people are saying it's stemming from these reports that they're getting from Nyon about him that his spies hear about, and then he tries to kill them.
Noyon reports that Calvin was punished for sodomy in his youth, the punishment being downgraded from death to a burn mark. The notarized report may have been Catholic spite.
And so I point that out. It might have been fabricated to blacken John Calvin's name. We didn't see John Calvin's body. It was covered up right when he died, conveniently. And so this next part's interesting. The Calvinists can't deny this. They might get mad at me for using a Jeffrey Epstein picture, but that's fine. I'll take it.
But in March of 1554, Calvin would advocate for a similar downgrading of punishment for certain homosexual pedophiles. Berthollier would
Okay, so this is within the Calvin letter volume, volume 2 of the source book, and it's towards the end. And what happens is there's a group of youth, some who are said to be too young to know any better, and some who are older youths, and the older youths have homosexual relationships with the younger ones. And Calvin writes asking to downgrade it from death to a public whipping. It kind of like, supposedly Calvin's own sodomy was downgraded from death to a burn mark. He advocates something very similar. It's a very interesting parallel. Let's go try to pull that up real quick, see if I got it. I gotta search for pedophile.
PDF. What's
PDF
the code
file?
phrase for that now? PDF file, yeah.
Yeah. There's an IT Crowd episode where the guy's name is Peter File, and that's how they say pedophile in England. They call it Peterphile.
Oh, PETA, yeah.
Peter File, and the guy's name, and then she can't date, the girl can't date him because she doesn't want to be dating someone whose name's Peter File. Like there's an announcement at the airport, is Peter File here? He's like, I'm Peter File, and everyone's like, look at him like, ah. Anyways, okay, so here's Calvin. He says that the said crime is sufficiently proven against the said boys respectively. The crime is almost as atrocious and abominable as can be found. Appears from the Holy Scripture, also from law, excessively strange and monstrous thing in such youth. I'm just going to scroll down. He says the younger ones, too young. As for the other three who are older, considering their said age, we find capable of the said crime together with their habit, body development, and knowledge of what they had of the said crime. Punishment for it, like they are old enough to know better. Together from a long repetition, it's like they've been engaged in this for a while. Not only before they saw the last sodomite, they've seen sodomites put to death and burned, but also on the examination, they've all confessed, which shows their determined malice. They says we can't find that by law their youth can exempt them from punishment. So what does he say? Scrolling down. Blah blah blah. Therefore, following provisions of law, we cannot find that they do not deserve death, though not so rigorous a death as boys if they had been older. Blah blah blah. He says, nevertheless, if it pleases your excellencies to grant them mercy from death, it seems nevertheless they cannot be exempt from a public and exemplary bodily punishment, for it's not possible that the said crime be hidden and concealed. There would be greater danger and scandal in impunity or covering over the punishment, one which fear the wrath of God, blah, blah, blah. Therefore, it seems to us that the three older boys at least deserve to be publicly whipped through the crossroads with a rope around the neck. In some public places where they're whipped, a fire should be lit to show them the punishment of such an abominable crime deserves. So he's arguing for a downgrading of the natural punishment of death to public flogging, public display. And so that part's accurate. It's just no one points this letter. I'm the first one. You're like, where did you find this thing about this letter? By reading John Calvin's letter. I was reading
an ADHD hyperfocus binge of all this stuff, and
I'm just reading all his letters, and then I read this letter. Like, what has happened? This is so John Calvin, known for being vengeful and monstrous and very severe, is advocating this downgrading of homosexual conduct. I just thought that was very strange when I was reading. And so another thing, we'll hit play, but this talks about, like, I'm not making this up, that he's killing these Berthollier brothers in vengeance. We already read in one of my clips that I had, I think it was Galifet, who was saying the same thing, that these people were targeted for their investigations in Nyon. They're targeted with this hatred and vengeance of Calvin. He gets them executed. And we already read why they're executed. The younger brother didn't think that he had anything to fear of execution because he did nothing wrong. Calvin gets him executed.
Would be chased from Geneva and his younger brother beheaded on trumped-up charges. In an unrelated story, Bezek,
Yeah, so this is actually really funny. So this is one of our biggest back and forths on the internet. You and I, over the last couple of days, talking about John Calvin's anal trauma. It's it's a very funny thing to go back and forth with people about. Like Grok and ChatGPT doesn't think this exists because they're not trained on primary sources and they just repeat modern talking points. And if the modern talking points say, "Oh, Bolsek had a claim Calvin was gay and Bolsek is just a pamphleteer," it'll just repeat those. It'll just aggregate those and repeat those. And I had this big back and forth with Grok, just trying to get it to admit what the primary sources said. At one point it does, but then automatically it's like a clock resets and it just doesn't understand what's being said and what's being advocated. It can't, it, and the problem is like these Calvinists, they come in and they'll use Grok to do their thinking for them. I said in one statement, John Calvin, accused homosexual, had prior anal trauma, and it said that I was false. We already found.
You said like if I was answering a question on a game show, and the question was this, and I said true, would you award me the point?
Okay,
or
so
not?
so
And
here's
at
what
one stage
happened.
it's-
So I just had that
Yeah.
one statement that accused homosexual had admitted anal trauma, admitted by his closest friends, and Grok said, "Oh, that's a lie," and I said, "Okay, what part of that is a lie? Was Calvin accused homosexual?" And it's like, "No, these are all scandalous reports." It's an accusation. Was he accused homosexual? We just went over all sorts of accusations that he was a homosexual. He wasn't accused homosexual. You know, were those accusations credible? That's a different statement. But what Grok does is it tries to guess more than it can. It's just trying, and then it pulls in terrible like aggregate references. So John Calvin's accused homosexual. That part wasn't incorrect. And then I was purposely not pointing to my sources when I said that his closest associates claimed he had prior anal trauma. And that part wasn't a lie either. And so ChatGPT is going to be able to admit this a lot faster than Grok is. But I had to, number one, I had to point out where this document existed. Exactly where is publicly being able to reference. Then I had to force it to give me the translation. And then I had to ask it if it's true that his closest friend said he had prior anal trauma. It still denied it. And I said, okay, if we were on a game show and then I made this claim and then you had to award me a point or deny me a point, then would you give me a point for this being accurate? And then finally it said, okay, I would give you that point. The thing is that the algorithm is so ingrained for consensus and against primary research, like it's not able to process information. And so like midwit people and idiots, they eat up this AI stuff to do thinking for them. Yeah, this is part of AI hallucinating. And part of the reason that this happens is it's not trained on things. It's not trained on our book, The Shadow of Rousseau, to try to accurately talk through whether or not Bolsek is reliable and the things he said, if they're probable or possible. It's just trained to take modern consensuses and just spit out kind of those things. Like the Calvin scholars, like, wow, that sounds pretty scandalous if he was a branded homosexual, so it must not be true. There must not be any validity to it. They must all must have been lying. And that's typically not how rumors work. That's typically not how rumors function. Rumors tend to be based in some sort of truth. So one of the rumors that we haven't talked about is that Bolsek talks about how there's scandalous reports because John Calvin was spending a lot of time with young ladies as well. They'd just disappear in his house for a while and to receive education or training or whatever. And there's rumors that he's having sexual relations with young ladies as well. These are rumors, and he says they're rumors, and he says it's better for a pastor not to be alone with ladies in a house so then these rumors don't start. And so these rumors exist, and he's just reporting on them. All right, But this is actually pretty funny. I did this like, have you ever seen The Penetrator?
Yes.
The Penetrator. So this guy rigs up this bike, and with a spike within the seat, and the spike will jump up. Whoever jumps on the bike, if they're just like jumping on the bike to steal it or run off real quick, their butt will come slam down hard, and the spike will go up into their butt. And he's got videos of people trying to steal this bike, just getting just their butts destroyed by this bike. So I thought, okay, Calvin has this unspecified prior anal trauma. Well, it'd be really funny if like I just depicted him getting a bike, him being a bike thief, and then doing, because Betza doesn't tell. Betza's a Calvin Sicko fan. If you read Betza's life, it's just raving psychotic praise of Calvin that's unhinged. And so he's even if he knew anything about Calvin, let's just pretend Calvin was a homosexual for a second and had a weak butthole for prior sodomy acts. Betza's not going to put that. He's not going to put that in Calvin's life. Betza's portraying Calvin as a suffering servant. Oh, he was so godly and holy, and he suffered all these things. But while he was dying, he graced us but with rewriting institutes and translating it. He was such a great guy, although he had all these ailments. He was just so holy that he dedicated. He's not going to say like he had his hemorrhoids were so terrible because he did gay stuff in his past. That's not what's going to happen. So the evidence that exists is very consistent with Calvin being a prior homosexual. But it's also consistent with him just having some sort of weird anal trauma event at some time in his life somewhere. Maybe he's riding a horse, or I don't know. I don't know how one gets anal trauma that exacerbates hemorrhoids. I don't know. And the thing about it is, I'll go for it.
In the comments, you've got you interact with this guy Mug Judge, where he says, "I'd love to hear your response to my comment showing how accidents is referring to symptoms from sickness."
He just makes he makes this like idiotic claim that like, oh, the weak butthole was from like secondary events that like it's not a real claim. It's so again, Bolsec's writing, or not Bolsec, Betza's writing, Life of Calvin. He's not going to say his butt was blown out by homosexual sex. He's not going to ever write that. He vaguely references that Calvin's hemorrhoids are exacerbated from prior accident or a medical incident within Calvin's life. So he's not claiming, oh, these are side effects of some long. That's not what's happening. When Betza uses that word elsewhere, he's just talking about, hey, these are medical episodes. These are medical incidences. So he's unspecific as to what those medical instances are. So he's not making, Mugshug's not making like this, that Betza's making this out to be some sort of, Betza's unspecific. He's vague. And the vagueness about this very weird little fact, that's what is being pointed to in this video.
It's Biza, by the way. I just Googled it. It's been driving me nuts.
Yeah, okay,
Biza.
So this says, you haven't shown how this accidental trauma is homosexual. Did I say it was? You people, this ominously anonymous, did I say it was? Where did I say that this was definitely a homosexual instance? Should we watch the video again? Did you people watch the video? You guys are such lying pieces of scum. Let's listen.
Well, and this is
On Calvin a homosexual? Maybe.
Maybe. Okay, so you heard all the evidence. You heard all the facts. There's probably a few more that we could be going over. We could go over more of these claims and their possible validity. It's up to you to put together the evidence and what we have, come to your own conclusion. And so when I was in Norway, I was with this Norwegian guy, and we went and saw these World War II bunkers or whatever. And the tour guide guy was saying, "Oh, the Nazis did this, and then they did this, and these Norwegians heroically did whatever." And then my friend I was with talked to our Norwegian friend guy. He's like, "How much of this is true?" The guy's like, 50-50. Was Calvin homosexual? I'm giving it a 50-50. I'm giving it a coin flip. But you could come to your own conclusion based on their own evidence. The reason I make these videos is it's not about Calvin, it's about Calvinists. They're just completely horrid, evil people. And Calvin was a horrid, evil person. He's one of the worst people in history. Megalomaniac. He considered himself God. But it's exposed to these Calvinists. You ask the Calvinists, did Betza, Calvin's sycophant, claim that Calvin had prior anal trauma from some unspecified accident? And they won't answer. They will deflect. They'll call you a liar. Like, these people are not interested in facts. And that's why these videos are being put out.
Well, and this is what I said about the whole ordeal. And one of the things that seemed to have gotten me blocked by somebody that I've been interacting with on X for a while, who just jumps to the wildest, most uncharitable conclusions about the things that I say, like, "Oh, you're just being dishonest, this and that and the other." And I just said, like, no one cares about the truth. Like, no one cares about this. Like, you've posted the quotes, said, "What about this person?" And nobody's engaged with that. This Ryan Reeves, scholar on Servetus and Calvin, didn't have anything to say about any of this. And so, and even the people that I say, let's just grant that all this is true. This doesn't mean Calvinism is false, does it? Won't engage with that either. Like, just like, we can't talk about facts in an objective manner about all of this.
Okay, so moving real quick, this guy's still on his little thing about the word being used. Betz is not a medical professional. You look at how Betz is using the word. Here is the actual claim. Oh, I guess we haven't read it yet for this anal trauma. The illness left him so weakened he never afterward could return to his full health. From then on, he dragged the right leg, so he's walking with a limp, which at times caused him great pains. His old infirmities also worsened again, namely his headaches and great crudities, which caused him a perpetual defluxion. He was assaulted by hemorrhoids, all the more troublesome because formerly, by an accident, that part had been greatly weakened. So we got an unspecified medical incident. And it's not like.
So what is the argument here that a secondary cause like that?
He's saying that
his medical injuries were a secondary cause for worsening his hemorrhoids.
This guy's argument is this doesn't mean that there's some prior anal trauma, but like this is just like a side effect of prior medical illness. It's an unspecified prior medical incident which weakened his butthole. Okay? That's what's happening here. No matter how you want to spin it. You're like, well, he's using a technical term that the health issues, like prior health issues. He says, let's just read Betza. He was assaulted by hemorrhoids, all the more troublesome because formerly, by an accident, that part had been greatly weakened. And you just go see how he uses this word accident. You could go pull up the original French. They translate. They don't even translate the other uses of accident as accident. They certain events. 2 or 3 times he has another medical event. These are medical events. 2 or 3. We'll try to find that real quick. Yeah, I don't have it offhand, but that's what it means. It's a medical incident. He had a prior unspecified medical incident which caused butthole trauma. Like this is not arguable. This is like we're not having an argument about this. I could read, you could read, everyone could read, and your secondary thing is there's an unspecified prior anal trauma. It's just the facts of it. So, he doesn't say what it is that made Calvin's butthole so sore when he's assaulted by hemorrhoids that exacerbates the hemorrhoids. For some reason, Calvin's got some sort of butthole thing. Like, this is not a debate. This is not a debate. It's just.
I feel like this episode has to be demonetized, doesn't it? Like,
I don't think anything's
are we gonna get
monetized
it for hate speech.
I don't think anything's monetized. I have said nothing against homosexuality. Homosexuality is great and fine. I'm such a supporter of the modern day message about homosexual. I am an LGBT PTKTY advocate ally. It makes John Calvin a better person. He might have been a tyrant who killed people at a whim, but at least he was a homosexual. 50-50. 50-50. Yeah, 50-50.
Flip a coin.
Flip a coin. And so I showed this to some people, and they say, "Oh, this evidence is pretty rock solid that he is a homosexual." I don't think that's like rock solid. There's certain things that could have. I am giving it like a 50-50. And so, do I think Bullsick saw a letter? I think Bullsick saw a letter. I think Bullsick is trustworthy.
And question, because this is one thing that intrigued me about, you releasing these shorts and us going over some of this via chat, is this specific detail from Beza's account. Is that like there are different translations of it or something? Mm-hmm. And can you talk briefly about that?
Okay, so Beza's Life of Calvin was released in 3 different versions. So John Calvin dies. Beza writes a Life of Calvin in French, and he appends it onto some of John Calvin's post-mortem type of work that's being released. And it's just kind of this crazy psychotic rambling. And so I caught this because I read it. I read Betz's life, and then I translate his life in Latin, and I'm like, oh, I don't need duplicate copies. So I deleted all my first work. I was like, I'll just use the third one because the third one's probably going to be best. And then I was trying to search it for things that I remembered reading. I'm like, it's all missing. And then it dawned on me. It's like it was significantly rewritten. And what was rewritten? All the crazy rambling about all the modern complaints, because Beza's responding to all the critics. All these things that modern people say about Calvin were said in Calvin's day, such that as soon as he died, his crazy fanatical follower lists out all the claims against him and sets out to refute them all. These things that we're saying today were said by people at Calvin's time in Geneva, in the wider world, people who knew and communed with Calvin and who knew him intimately. That's what's going on. So I was like, it feels like in the rewrite, the second rewrite, there's a guy like Caledon or whoever who extends the life of Beza in French. And then the third rewrite is Beza doing the rewrite in Latin. So in the book that I put out, published, has the original Life of Calvin, and then the third version, the Latin longer Life of Calvin, both by Beza. I skipped the second one because there's just a lot of overlap. It's not giving us anything new. But the butthole thing is coming from the original one where he's ranting and raving. I think they when they're making their like recensions and editing, they figured out how bad it looks. Not only that he's listing out all these modern claims against him, but they're playing their hand too much. And so I think that all was cut out.
In the original rants and ravings in the French, he's basically talking about, hey, people say this about Calvin, but actually he was very austere. He was a godly man. He studied all the time and stuff. And in that particular one is the one that the anal trauma is mentioned.
Yeah. In? Yes, absolutely. And so the whole ranting and raving about Calvin's critics, like that's a critical part of this document. Everyone should read it.
So is there a section that's like the parallel in the Latin version where you can just see that it's left out? Do you have any idea?
In the Latin version, like the whole thing's like rewritten and reorganized.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so at first I was just going to take the third one and then splice in relevant sections from the first, but it's so much different that
Right.
I decided to keep it as its own because I think it works as its own work. Relatively sense. I asked ChatGPT how much overlap there was, and it's about 50% of the stuff of the original was cut. 50 was pulled over to the second. And the second's basically more than double the length. And so it comes out when you do the math to like a 23% of the material between the two kind of overlap. Just doing rough math.
Right. Right.
Okay, someone asked me who wrote my anonymous book. An anonymous friend of mine who writes me emails all the time. He wrote it. I thought it was so amazing that I published it. And you could get the audiobook on my channel. And so just go, you could put that in, and then you could, because I converted it to audiobook, it was so good. I didn't write it. I wish I wrote it. There's a few changes I'd make if I did write it. But
Which was the anonymous book? Remind me again.
Understanding Calvinism's thinking, behavior, and
Oh,
language.
that's right.
And so
That's
it's just
right. I
about
read a little bit of that.
this Calvinist cult in which these people are in this kind of like a bubble world. And so this is one of the reasons I publish these things. Like this thing about Calvin, it kind of exposes these people. John Calvin was really, really terrible human being, and they defend him and they protect him. They write lies about him. It's basically a cult. This man is not someone to emulate, and they defend him with all their vigor. He's a very bad person. All right. So, okay. So, those are two of the videos. We got so much more, and I skipped so much of my sources that I was going to be talking about today. We're going to go through everything said about Berth Lear, but I sent you personally some more of the evidence for these various claims made in these videos. These videos take a lot of work to put together. For 60 seconds, there's a lot of sources being compact into a very small amount of time. But they're all
And Chris
sourced.
promises to put subtitles on all of the future.
If I want to pay for CapCut,
send it to me. Send it to me, and I'll put subtitles on it, and I'll send it back to you.
yeah, I could send you all these.
They're small files. It's only 60 seconds.
They're like the 40 megs each or something like that.
I had to pay for CapCut the other day. I've let my subscription lapse because I've not been doing a lot of work, but I did this. I do a newsletter like update type thing, and there was like music and like this animation and stuff that I was exporting, and it was like you need premium in order to do all this, and I was like, oh no, I'm gonna have to like remove all this stuff, and I was just like, stuff it. I'm just gonna spend I don't know what it was, like $15 or something for the month.
Yeah. Okay, I'll send those to you. But yeah, so this whole thing comes down to Bullsick and Bullsick's reliability. If all the critics of Bullsick, their biggest complaint about Bullsick is that he talked about these homosexual rumors, and that's the reason that they're saying he's lying about everything else. I'm with Gallifei. I'm with the actual Genevan expert who says that Bullsick doesn't lie. Bullsick is telling the truth. He might have some inaccuracies in small details, but the Calvinists, they just outright lie. Everyone in Calvin's time, all his critics are like, we don't believe anything he says about Servetus. He writes a whole book about Servetus. We don't believe him. These people are known for just lying for their own benefit.
Well, you've seen what he's done to dissenting people who question him. So, you're going to foster a sense of just mere self-preservation of people that praise everything that he does and hagiographizes him. Is that a word?
Yeah. The interesting thing is when Stalin died, there's people crying at his funeral. And people got into this cult of Stalin, this terrible mass murderer dictator who used spies, denunciations, killed people for political power. Calvin's doing the same thing, and he's got his own cult. people wearing his picture around the city. He's replacing pictures of Jesus with picture of Calvin because he considered himself God. Any attack on him was attack on God. You have him multiple times just saying this. The guy's a megalomaniac psychopath. And then people defend him, and they talk about him like he's a good guy. They talk about him like he's humble. We have his works. We have his letters. In Volume 4, which is not published yet, we have him going back and forth with a guy who was like a son to him and just ripping him to shreds with the worst evil. Oh, okay, so one of the things I did want to talk about was an account of Calvin rereading one of his own works and then noting what terrible language Calvin had. And in Calvin's defense, he's like, I wrote none of those words in malice. He's like, wow, those words seem pretty harsh, but I wrote none of them in malice. And he's like congratulating himself on not actually thinking any malice of someone as he rips them apart and calls them the worst names. Like the guy's, he's delusional. He's literally a delusional.
I called you a wicked, evil calumniator, but I didn't mean anything mean by it.
When I wrote it, it was just
it's
true.
Just the facts.
It's just true.
Yeah.
When I wrote it, it was true. It sounds harsh, but I had no malice. I'm not a guy who has... The guy storms out of dinners if you say one word against anything he preaches. The guy will get you fired for the rest of your life if you call him a hothead. This guy is a narcissist psychopath. All right. So, get the Calvin Servetus Volume 1, which is all really pro-Calvinist type Servetus trial information. The letters, which give you some insight. Life of Betza is a very interesting source to read. Probably a more true account of Calvin's life than what is presented by Betza. Like the people of Nyon seem to not actually esteem Calvin as highly as Betza would lead us to believe. He's known as being arrogant and just striving for power and position. So get that volume. Volume 4 is going to cover things like the History of Geneva by James Fazey. I got a huge translation of his work, which he'll contextualize a lot of these things which are going on. Let me pull that up real quick so I could get the table of contents. So that's going to have the death of Servetus in it. It's going to have Costello's book against Calvin. It's also going to have On Heretics by Costello. So right after Servetus dies, Costello starts circulating excerpts from various authors explaining why we don't execute heretics. Calvin was mad about that. Then right after it as well, Calvin puts out his book, and then Costello starts circulating his response. Calvin got really mad about that. So both of those will be in there. The annuals of the records, like the official annual of records about the Servetus trial, those are going to be in there. An epitaph written about Costello, who is a humble person. So one of the things that one of these authors points out is like all these people who are Calvin's friends, they all get burned, and he turns on them all eventually. It's just like being Stalin's friend. All these people who helped Stalin rise to power, they're all disappeared. They're all executed. They're sent to Gulag. Same thing happened with Calvin. It's like all these people that were his support system who brought him in. Amy Perrin helped bring him back. Like then he has to flee Geneva because Calvin's trying to kill him. And so there's a lot of parallels with Stalinism within the Calvin story. I have the Baudin, his commentary on the laws concerning defamatory libels, because Calvin had written an entire slanderous thing against Baudin that he writes to, and then Calvin's response. And so Calvin's response is going to be very interesting because he is just full of vitriol and hatred. He's a scumbag. Then I got Sands Bibliotheca Antitrinitorium, which gives a Servetus biography with excerpts from the lost eyewitness account by Hyperphorogenus of the death of Servetus. And then I'm going to include James Fazey, Summary of the History of the Republic of Geneva. I need to get in there somewhere. Bolsik also wrote a Life of Betza. So in the volume 3 that's published, the Catholic author, had taken excerpts from the life of a Life of Betza, and then pulled out the Calvin parts. And so you're going to have excerpts about Calvin and extra information about the life of Calvin within those excerpts from the Life of Betza. But I have not translated yet, and I have not read yet the Life of Betza, in which Bolsek takes apart the hagiographer of Calvin as himself being a corrupt and evil individual. The Calvinism tree is all corrupt all the way down. So it's like turtles all the way down. They're all corrupt. So that'll be in volume 4, and there might be a volume 5. There's just so much material. It's just ridiculous. Anyways, so all my short videos, they all have bases for all their claims, whether or not they exist just in the audio. All right, so are you convinced? Are my videos inaccurate? Are they defensible? Are you still with me?
I'm still here. I mean, if anything, you've brought receipts, which is why I wanted to talk about this. You know, there's lots of different quotes from different people, and I think it's really interesting. You know what you said about Bolsek and this guy, was it Watts?
Watts is a very interesting guy.
Or Galiffi? Which one was the one that said that he reckoned that
Galiffi?
Yeah,
Galiffi. That's another guy I need to translate. I need to translate all the relevant Galiffi. Galiffi says somewhere that he's going to write a Life of Bolsek. I don't know if it ever happens because I don't have a copy of his volume 4, which in volume 3 says, in the next volume I'll write about the Life of Bolsek. But I don't have a copy of his volume 4 to check to see if that ever happened. But he puts a lot of stock in this is all stuff in French too. None of this stuff is in English. It's so that's interesting. But I need to translate some of his stuff because he makes a lot of insightful comments about Geneva and misattributions. Like the Calvinists say, oh, Calvin came into Geneva and was wicked and corrupt. Wasn't wicked and corrupt. Calvin's just a narcissist and he's delusional, and he counts any opposition to him as corruption and wickedness. If you want to have communion with yellow bread instead of unleavened bread, you are of the devil.
It definitely brings new visual perspective to seeing the and I think this was relatively common of the previous eras or whatever, but like where they preach from in terms of this like thing that like extends out and above and over everyone, which is very, very countercultural to us now and day. But I can definitely visualize all of the the angry sermons about people that have offended him and stuff.
Yeah. So, this guy says, I just read the book and wanted to know who the person was so I could respond directly. If you want to send it to me, I'll forward it to him. I won't even read your response. I'll just forward it straight to him. It's not like I got a lot of time to just be digging around doing random things anyways. But all right, we'll cut there. We'll have to reconvene and talk through some of these other videos. Well, what we could do is we could just play the video out that is just a quote by someone. And so I'm not even making any claims. I'm just reading someone's quote. And Calvin the Jacobin. I thought this was an interesting quote, so I turned it into a video.
Calvin was of the race of our Jacobins. He was a Montagnard theologian. Liberty in his eyes was only the right to love what he loved, to think as he thought. In freeing himself, he believed he had sufficiently freed the world. Every opposition to his doctrines was no longer for him anything but execrable revolt, monstrous heresy, worthy of every punishment. Calvin, in a word, had made himself God, without knowing it, and no longer adored anyone but himself alone. He was the Pope, he was the Church, he was everything, devoted to truth, such as he perceived it, even to fanaticism. Martyr of the faith he had imposed on himself, irreproachable even to austerity in his morals, pious, living only for study and for the propagation of his ideas. Charitable, he believed himself so at least, even when he had people burned, and persecuting them only for their own good and for the general good. An honest Jacobin, a virtuous Montagnard. one of those excellent patriots who would have killed the whole world to save the fatherland. Sylvester de Sacy, 1864. Calvin was of the race.
You're muted.
Yeah, a lot of these character profile comments we have about Calvin are very accurate. But we'll close there. We'll reconvene and talk about some of these other videos at a later date. But hopefully this gets people to understand this, these are not made up videos. These are not coming from nowhere. They have sources, they have evidence, and they can be defended, and detractors can be shut down pretty easily. So, any closing comments for us?
Nope. Flip a coin and decide after you finish this broadcast what you think.
Flip a coin. Yeah, maybe. Alrighty then. Well, everyone, thanks for coming today. Have questions or comments, or if you want to talk sources, good place to do that would be on the Facebook God is Open page to talk through various of these issues, because that gives us more of a format type thread where there could be response, and then there could be different branching conversations and things about like that. So if anyone wants direct quotes, just ask for those direct quotes, or you could go buy the Calvin Volume 3 volume, in which most of these things that we talked about today are referenced, or you could grab the Watts volume that I told you how to Google and find for the Constitutory, or you could just go find all the original documents in Latin and in French everywhere, and then go through a tedious process of sifting through them. These are all things you could do. Like when I do stuff, when I wrote The Hellenization of Christianity, it was present all the primary sources so you could double check my work. I'm not making things up. I think that's how historians should be doing work, rather than just trust me, bro. All right. Well, thanks for coming, and we'll play us out here.